Up all night global sports entertainment for stable hands, security guards, and people who missed the last train home and woke up in the park getting spooned by a Scottish tramp.
You can sleep in a damn patch.
The two Mikes, Parry and Graham, on Talk Sport.
It's alright, I'm not gonna hurt you.
Right, come on, you four-eyed fat-faced fool. Tell us what's going to be in the new podcast from the two Mikes.
Well, plenty of buffoonery from you and lots of sense from me. What else?
Look at the light.
They're coming to take me away. Ha ha. They're coming to take me away. Ha ha.
This is Talk Sport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. Mike Parry is here. It's a special edition of the two Mikes because the world of football, Mike Parry, is in global crisis. A very good morning to you.
Yeah, very good morning to you, Mike. It is in global crisis, and it's something some would say has been coming for nearly 3 decades.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to say it's down to people in our profession who've now brought this to a head. I mean, the Sunday Times investigation of the last 2.5 years, absolutely paramount. And all the time, of course, FIFA have been doing what they've been doing for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Batting away allegations, batting away allegations, batting away allegations. You know, we'll go into a bit more detail later, but even when an internal report presented to them by an American investigator...
Which they commissioned themselves,
which they commissioned themselves and was given to them and said, look, this is getting very, very serious. That was written by a guy called Michael Garcia.
That's right.
That report went into FIFA, who then managed through their own internal investigator, a guy called Hans Jochen Eckert, if you remember, the Scandinavian, managed to turn the report round to such an extent that Mr. Garcia washed his hands of the report and said that was not my report.
He said he didn't want to be associated with it.
Now, you see, that to me meant the woods were burning at that stage.
Right.
And again, the vital clue here is that an American got involved.
Yeah.
America...
Because the one place where FIFA really doesn't have much actual strength and power is the United States of America.
Absolutely. There aren't too many people in America looking for favours from FIFA for the obvious reason that the World Game has not yet really embraced America to the extent it's embraced Europe and South America, right? So what I'm saying is that you put that together with the fact that for so many years now, for so many decades, America in geopolitical situations has been accused of being an overbearing policeman of the world. Well, America is the policeman in the world when it comes to straight and corrupt business in the world of football, and funnily enough, and they have to be. I'm sorry, Mike, I mean, it's talking about football, but they have to be because America's the biggest business country in the world, so they've got to keep business clean.
Right, but the funny thing is that the reason that they've been able to make these moves and make those arrests through the Swiss authorities yesterday morning, which broke just as we were finishing our show about 5:10. Yesterday morning. I think
you were the first to raise it.
We were. I mean, we just sometimes these things happen.
I'm going to give you the credit. You saw a Twitter from a mate of yours over in America or something, and suddenly alerted the office to the fact that, hang on, do you know what's going on here? Raids going on all over Europe and America.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is the New York Times obviously had the in on this story because they're obviously very close to the Eastern District of New York, a place we know very well, where the US attorneys used to arrest mafia chiefs, where they used to arrest the guys on Wall Street. I mean, that's the background to all of this. These guys always get their man.
Oh, yeah, and Loretta Lynch, who is the very, very impressive US Attorney General, cut her teeth in attorney generalism, if that's the word.
Yeah, it's not really, but
in the Eastern District of New York.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And so, I mean, what basically has happened is because of the new rules they brought in to curb sort of terror activities, they've been able to find people who are sending money through US banks, and that's why they've come for these people, because all of this money that they're alleged to have taken and been taken as bribes and kickbacks and everything else has gone through the American banking system.
That's right.
That's why they're being done for wire fraud. That's why they're being done for money laundering. That's why they're being done for racketeering, which is very serious. 20 years in jail.
Oh, racketeering is the most serious one. I've just done my research, as I always do in these sort of situations. The last time that the FBI launched an operation of this size involving these sort of sums of money was in 1947.
Was it?
A few minutes after Bugsy Siegel got shot at his home in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills. Bugsy Siegel, of course, the famous film was made, starring, what's his name, starred in Shampoo, I'm talking about Shirley MacLaine's brother, Warren Beatty, right? And a few minutes after he was shot in a coordinated operation, the mob moved in on Bugsy's hotel in Las Vegas and took it over. That all appeared in FBI records. And then the FBI launched a racketeering campaign against mobsters in America. This is the biggest operation since. That tells you something about the extent of the corruption that is being alleged in this massive investigation into FIFA worldwide.
And it is just the beginning. I mean, the most bizarre thing, well, as you say, we'll get into all the details of it as we go on through the show, and we'll take your calls on it as well. You know the number, 08717 223344. We've got 9 officials from FIFA. We've got 5 other interesting people from various media organisations who have been indicted as well. The guys in Switzerland are going to fight extradition by the looks of it, so that might take a few weeks to get sorted out. Sepp Blatter, meanwhile, is sitting there in Switzerland saying,
can't leave.
We're still going on with the election for my,
and can't leave, by the way.
Yeah, my re-election as president. He has not been named in any of these papers. He's not under indictment
hang on, let's
in
make
any
it
way, shape or form.
absolutely clear. Sepp Blatter's hands are absolutely clean as of this moment, and that's been made clear by the fact that even the FBI are saying that Mr. Blatter, the only statement we've got from Mr. Blatter's people are that those people below him, right, you know, if they've been guilty of anything, they must be investigated. Yeah. And his own spokesman, Sepp Blatter's own spokesman, has said this is a good day for FIFA. Yeah. So Mr. Blatter is saying, look, I want to run a very straight organisation. Right. If anything's been going on below me, we must get it sorted out. So he's, he's so as white as white.
So far, he's managing to separate himself from it. But, of course, this is what FIFA always do. I mean, FIFA have even got as far as to say that, you know, the whole reason for this big investigation by the FBI and by the US Attorney General's office is because we basically started the original investigation, which they then followed up. Yeah. Now, that may well be true, and it may well be true that FIFA would like to keep themselves running as the way that they've always run. But surely FIFA now cannot possibly exist in the form that it's been existing for the last, say, 30 or so years.
No, it can't possibly. And the reason it can't possibly is that it will implode from inside. I mean, what will happen is, at some stage, some official somewhere will look at their own rule book, and what happens is, those who try to save themselves will have to dismantle FIFA in its present form. Right. It'll have to be. Yeah. And what will happen is now, mate, in the long term, UEFA will now take over as the most powerful body in the world, because it'll be proven that one great world body controlling football is too big, is too out of control, and is too susceptible to corruption to be able to be allowed to exist in future. It would be like having a world government. Yeah, exactly. It would be like having, you know, for all the governments in the world, one world government, where it becomes so massive that the cream offs at the top are only a small percentage of the total lot. And the other thing is here, another reason why the Americans have gone for it, I've talked to somebody over there today, is that because it's absolutely clear that if somebody's skimming off $120 million from funds generated through FIFA, that means a lot of kids in the Sudan who might have had new football pitches, new changing rooms, new stadia, to spread the world game, as Mr. Blatter has always said he wants to do, ain't got those football pitches, ain't got those dressing rooms, ain't got those new stadia. And that is the core of the issue. And that is the core of the issue. But also the massive other issue that we have to talk about is Russia and Qatar. You know, obviously, you know, Russia was awarded the World Cup in 2018. Qatar have got it for 2022. Damien Collins, the Tory MP, and is a supporter of a new FIFA Now campaign. He was on kick-off. Let's have a listen to what he has to say.
I think those competitions have got to be rerun. I think, you know, to all the world, it now looks like that was a corrupt process. 7 of the 22 people who voted on those countries hosting the tournament have been forced out of world football because of corruption. One of those people, Chuck Blazer, today it's been revealed that he's pleaded guilty on 10 counts to the US prosecutors of relating to allegations on corrupt payments, money laundering and racketeering. So how can we have any confidence in that process at all? It has to be rerun. And I think that the fact that we've got such little time to do it just shows the scale of the crisis that FIFA is allowed to build up and the pressure it's put on itself.
Now, FIFA are saying at the moment that there's no question that those 2 World Cups will not go ahead. But don't forget, the US Attorney's Office is calling this whole charabang the World Cup of fraud. Yeah. I don't see any possibility that Russia and Qatar can have the World Cup now.
No, I don't. But I have to say, of all the drama that we've seen today, I did think the most pathetic statement came from the guy from the IRS who said, FIFA is the world game and today we have issued the red card. Yes. Oh, that was such a bit of American phony.
Like they always do. Yeah, but like they always do in these things. They try and see who can get the soundbite or the news, don't they? And it was, I mean, you know, it was for them, I suppose, it was quite smart.
Yeah. The other thing is, you've just mentioned Qatar and Russia, right? Separate investigation going on, which is based in Switzerland into the awarding of those. Yeah. And I see right from the moment the announcement came this morning, shortly after you actually identified it, some of the apologists for those governments were tweeting out things like, not an investigation into 2018 or 2022 World Cups, let's get perspective. Right. Well, I think it is.
Well, I think it is. And also, because I want to ask you about this as well,
Yeah.
because, of course, you've had great dealings with all sorts of FAs around the world when you were working at the FA. We'll find out some of that from you. But also, we're going to talk about the World Cup in South Africa in 2010, because some of these kickbacks and bribes were supposedly about that World Cup as well.
Absolutely.
We are the Two Mikes. This is a Two Mikes special on the crisis at FIFA. This is TalkSport. This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. Mike Parry is here with me. It's a Two Mikes special on the crisis at FIFA. Extraordinary developments over the last, not quite 24 hours, Mike, but incredible kind of numbers of allegations
What
involving corruption,
about,
involving money laundering, involving, wire fraud, as they call it, racketeering, which is normally reserved, basically, for the biggest sort of crime bosses in the mafia.
You know, racketeering, as I said, the last time they had an investigation like this into racketeering was in 1947, and that was the Las Vegas mob. But since then, they had one for Jimmy Hoffa. Remember Jimmy Hoffa, who was the union boss in America, who now forms part of the approach road to JFK Airport.
Well, either that or possibly Giant Stadium or very possibly Soldier Field in Chicago. Nobody's quite sure.
No, they did think it was Giant Stadium, one of the piling rigs, wasn't it, that went in, this body went in under it. Yeah, but they never quite found him. But no, what I was saying about Mr. Blatter is that I think he's covered by the general order from the FBI issued to the Swiss authorities that anybody working for FIFA now cannot leave the country. Yeah. So whilst Mr. Blatter is not in any way implicated in any of these charges that have been levelled today and the accusations being made, nevertheless, he will, quotes, have to help people with their inquiries into such a massive investigation, which is bound to follow.
Of course, and the focus at the moment of the investigation is all about CONCACAF, which is Central and North America, of course, and the man that knows an awful lot about that, and the South American region as well, CONMEBOL, as it's called, is our man Tim Vickery in Rio de Janeiro. Tim, a very good morning and welcome back to the show.
Lovely to be here. It's all very much a little bit kind of Goodfellas meets Chariots of Fire.
Oh, it certainly is.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you'll know an awful lot of the names of the people who have been named in these indictments, right?
Yes, and the one that jumps out to me, because I think this gets to part of the heart of the matter, not one of those arrested, one of those who's already pleaded guilty. A journalist originally called José Havila, Brazilian journalist who was the man behind Traffic, who were a sports marketing company who, until relatively recently, were the effective owners of South American football. They own the TV rights to everything. Now, Havila has pleaded guilty. At the time of pleading guilty, he paid $25 million. He has agreed to pay $151 million. The sums here are absolutely astronomical. I'm very interested, Michael, by the fact that the FBI investigation is talking about from 1991. So we're talking about 24 years. And I think in that time there have been two key developments. Number one has been the growth of the game. You think about it, since 1991, we've had first World Cups in Africa, first World Cups in Asia, first World Cup in the United States. We've had a considerable expansion of the global game. Number two, we've had the rise, the explosion of cable TV. You put it together, and what you got is there's a bigger, expanding global audience ready to watch the spectacle, and there's a means profitably by which you can sell the spectacle to them. And it's no coincidence then that the crux of the matter in this FBI investigation is that interface between the sports organisers, the presidents of the organisation, and the media partners, the media intermediaries. Having said that, so far, although the FBI document that they released from the Justice Department there in the States talks about FIFA, these particular contracts I would have thought would be CONCACAF contracts. That's the way that for the moment Blatter is trying to slide out of it, I think. This isn't a FIFA matter. These were contracts signed between CONCACAF.
Tim, can I just come in on that, mate? Because the point you've made from 91 is absolutely right. I was aware of England bidding for the 2006 World Cup when I worked at the FA in the mid-90s, right? And they came to a deal where England got the Euro competition in 96 to hold off bidding until 2006 for the World Cup, OK? But when the guys went round, I spoke to one guy who was part of the England bidding team who went to a South American country and told me that when he went to the bedroom of another delegate from another country that was bidding for the World Cup, he was competing with a man who had a suitcase on his bed with $1 million in cash, $1 million in cash in it. and the top of the suitcase was open and the money was there, and he was told this is what you're up against.
Indeed.
And I mean, that is not an apocryphal story. That came from the guy who saw it. And the other point I was going to make is, Tim, that the reason that the money was sort of anonymous in where it ended up was because you've identified the fact that there's the sports body and there's the media rights holders. But in the middle of that, all sorts of companies grew up calling themselves media rights traders. So yes. they were in the middle. They were buying the rights off the sporting bodies like FIFA, like UEFA, and I'm not suggesting for a moment UEFA involved, by the way, but I'm saying that they were. And then they were going out into the marketplace and waiting for TV organisations all over the world to bid for them. And they were middlemen. Indeed.
It's a horrible, murky world. A lot of these companies have their bases in tax havens and so on. I suppose in retrospect it's probably surprising that it took so long to look under the stone. But one thing interests me
they've been looking under the stone for decades. What's happened today is that looking under the stone was never good enough. The cover-up was so absolute from, a totalitarian organisation running the world's biggest sport. Looking under the stone never did any good.
I think to continue the analogy, they've now found somebody who's got big enough hands to lift the stone up. I think that's what's happened.
Absolutely right.
That's the US justice system because, these people, FIFA, they worked very, very hard to bring the United States into the fold of global football. The 1994 World Cup, a condition of that was that the States would launch its own major league and so on. They worked really hard to get America into the fold. I bet some of them are regretting that now because what it's done, it's brought into the tent a legal system with really impressive global connections, a global reach, and also a hard line on bribery. Until a few years ago, European companies could have the bribes that they paid in the third world, developing world, they could write them off against tax. That was always a beef between European companies and US companies because US companies couldn't do it. So FIFA, looking for those US dollars, they've brought into the tent the legal force which could well bring to an end this current phase in world football.
And let's look, Tim, at some of the names, and this is why we're talking to you, obviously, because I know it's not entirely within your remit, but, I mean, we've got the top man that they've arrested, the FIFA Vice President, Jeffrey Webb, who's registered in the Cayman Islands. He's the CONCACAF President, one of 7 Vice Presidents. But we've also got people like Rafael Esquivel, President of the Venezuelan Football Federation, Jose Maria Marin, former politician and former head of the Brazilian Football Confederation. We've also got Eugenio Figueiredo, former Uruguayan Association football executive. We've got people from Nicaragua, got Costa Rica in there. I mean, it's very much, cutting a swathe down Central and South America, this.
Well, and it's already having consequences. The federal police in Brazil have now gone to the office of Brazil's FA, the CBF. So they're looking for things. In Brazil's Congress, there's a move now to have a congressional investigation into Brazil's FA. So, that stone, it's beginning to roll. It's beginning to pick up momentum. And you really wonder where this is going to end.
Thing is, Tim, if $120 million odd of money is now languishing in bank accounts of people who are the intermediaries, who are the recipients of it around the world, and you've just given the example of one man alone who voluntarily paid back $120 million, so God knows how much the total amount of money is. The reason that the world should be outraged about this is because, as Mike and I were saying earlier, that $120 million just alone from that man should have been used, according to Mr. Blatter, to improve football facilities in the third world, all around the world, and the people who should have benefited have been cheated out of that.
Yes, I agree. However, you still have you have to answer the question: why does Blatter and why did Havelange before him keep getting elected? Now, part of it is the network of dependence and of crony capitalism that's grown up in FIFA, but also part of it, and to me, this is the saddest aspect of the whole story. It's been over the last 30, 40 years the lack of an alternative vision, the lack of an alternative global inclusive vision, and I keep waiting for Europe to come to its senses.
But Europe has tried to, Tim. Europe's tried time and time again, and whatever happens, whenever Europe tries to start their own leagues, their own super leagues, their own power base, FIFA just simply say, in that case, your country will not enter the next World Cup because we will ban you. We are the ultimate authority in football, and if we say no, you don't get into the competitions, you don't even get into the European competitions.
Yeah, you're going down the wrong path here, I think. At the end of the Second World War, Europe had more than half of FIFA's membership.
Mm-hmm.
By 1974, when Europe lost power in FIFA, Europe had less than a third of FIFA's membership. At that point, Havelange won the election. The Brazilian, he won the election. He unseated Stanley Rouse, the Englishman.
He did.
With a programme that said, number one, I'm going to increase the World Cup from 16 to 32 nations with more places for the developing world. Number two, I'm going to start World Cups at under 17 and under 20 level, which will be held in the developing world. Number three, I will sell a product called football and distribute the money around the various countries. Now, they've done all of those things with huge corruption, with huge crony capitalism, but they've delivered. Havelange and his hand-picked successor, Blatter, have delivered on that promise. What Europe hasn't done is forged alliances with other continental confederations.
Yeah, because I'm actually looking, Tim, at a breakdown of it. 54 members in UEFA, as far as FIFA is concerned, and there's over 160 in all of the other confederations, including Africa, Central and North America, South America, Asia, FIFA, Oceania.
In order to change, Europe must make alliances. Now, there's a fear in the rest of the world that if you let the Europeans have control, there will only be football in Europe. And as it is, they monopolise the best footballers in the world in the Champions League.
And most of the money.
The European clubs reluctantly release players for international games in Africa and in South America. And there's a fear, and I think it's a justified fear, that if you let them back, there'll only be football in Europe. Now, Europe has to assuage that. It has to do something to break that fear.
Yeah, but
it has to come up with an international vision.
Yeah, but Tim,
because
sorry, mate.
a lot of the people who run football are old men.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is Europe could not build alliances whilst Blatter and his predecessor, Havelange, were dishing out money around the world to expand their power base into countries that hardly played football, but were getting vast amounts of money from FIFA. UEFA had no way of combating that.
And let's face it as well, Tim, and we'll have to leave it there, Tim, as well. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. But the reality as well, Mike and Tim, is that, if these allegations are true, racketeering, fraud, money laundering going on for 24 years involving hundreds of millions of dollars, is it any wonder that anybody couldn't break in and actually form another organisation because they had a grip on it that was absolutely like no other?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, I appreciate Tim's expert knowledge on all of that, but the frustration within Europe for decades has been, we can't go to the third world. We can't go to Southeast Asia. We can't go to Africa or South Africa and promise them anything because FIFA have already got it.
Yeah.
And they're all going to vote for Blatter, providing Blatter keeps shelling out money to those countries.
Exactly, and as Tim said, UEFA had become a very small part of it all. We are the two Mikes. I'm Mike Parry, he's Mike Graham. Let's have a listen to Jerry Sutcliffe, former sports minister, part of the England 2018 bid team. He says he still thinks, despite all of the stuff going on around FIFA, it's a good day for the game.
We had a meeting in Brussels a few months ago when we were all trying to find a way of making it more transparent, calling for alternatives, but it was never going to happen through the internal mechanisms. Now that outside involvement has taken place, I think it will be a great opportunity. So I'm optimistic that the future can be good, provided we get through this and that we get through it the right way.
Talk Sport on DAB, digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM, the enduring home of football.
It's modern radio, only better.
Because they're all over. It's all over the front pages as well as the back pages, of course. Let me just tell you a little bit, though, about Loretta Lynch, because if anybody doubts the fact that she is going to be going to get her man and various other men, she was responsible for bringing various prosecutions against, of course, the mafia, but also she went after corrupt New York politicians as well. And she had a former New York State Senate Majority Leader Pedro Espada Jr. sentenced to 5 years in jail after being prosecuted by Lynch on embezzlement charges. And the one that I actually like, mafia-related one, is that she actually charged reputed mobster Vincent Asaro and his associates for the 36-year-old heist of $6 million in cash and jewellery from Lufthansa Airlines vault at John F. Kennedy International Airport, which, of course, was the plot for Goodfellas.
It was.
So, I mean, she's gone up against some pretty tough cookies, and she's won.
Absolutely. She cut her teeth, so to speak, as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District in New York, which you and I know very well.
Where Rudolph Giuliani used to be as well.
Absolutely. And she cleaned up Brookhaven, which we know as well, you know, the New York suburb. And she's also made a massive attack on corrupt police officers within the NYPD. Yeah. So she's got a fantastic track record. When I saw her speaking today, I was so impressed with the way she delivered the indictment and delivered it so clearly and with such confidence. Yeah. And then she revealed, well, actually, we've been investigating this since 1991. Yeah. So can you imagine a US Attorney General having to pull a case together that's been going on for over 20 years and get her facts right?
Isn't it astonishing?
She was incredibly impressive.
As Tim Vickery was saying there from Brazil, you know, Europe's got to get its act together. You know, I think that some of what he said was right. But, I mean, Europe has sort of been able to go along with an awful lot of what FIFA has done in the past. As you say, partly because they've been told there is no other way. Exactly. Partly because they haven't. But they haven't actually been strong enough to bind themselves together, because UEFA have never really done that either, have they?
No, I'll tell you the difference between UEFA and FIFA, Mike. UEFA exist in an area of the world where the clubs are so powerful that the clubs take, I would say, about 97% of the revenues that are generated by football in Europe. Yeah. See what I mean? Right. FIFA, a worldwide organisation, take about 97% of the revenues of the competitions they generate because they're international competitions with countries, not clubs. Yeah. And international countries don't have to pay the players, whereas the money that's raised in UEFA in Europe has to go to paying £300,000 a week to Ronaldo and Wayne Rooney and all that. Yeah. So UEFA don't have any spare cash. They're an administrative organisation to make sure the game runs properly. FIFA are a money-making machine. And that's another reason why UEFA could never come up against FIFA and compete with them, even if you keep it on a completely straight level with no corruption involved whatsoever. UEFA were never able to go to smaller countries in Europe and promise them vast wealth that FIFA could promise the vast wealth to countries around the world.
Sure. And Michel Platini at one stage was thinking about running against Sepp Blatter, but of course now everybody's dropped out from the whole race, apart from the Prince from the Middle East. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But what about this situation now where tomorrow, Friday, there is supposed to be this election for Sepp Blatter to get a fifth term? Well, I mean, FIFA say it's going to go ahead. Wow. FIFA say that the two things are not related. UEFA have suggested that it shouldn't go ahead, but UEFA have stopped short so far of saying that they're going to boycott the actual meeting.
Yes, they have, but Greg Dyke was interviewed briefly before he set off for Zurich, because, of course, he was always going to this meeting, because... and I tell you where I think the FA in this country have got a bit of an advantage. We never wavered from our support for Prince Ali, did we? No. Who is the only existing alternative candidate to Sepp Blatter after, as you quite rightly said, Michel Platini, Raoul dropped out, David dropped out, saw David being interviewed today, David
he was on Channel 4 News, I saw him,
absolutely. And so Prince Ali's the only one left. Now, Prince Ali is widely supported by another very good friend of this station, Ray Wilkins. Yeah. And Ray Wilkins speaks very, very highly of him, a man who has a huge reputation within football. Now, you would imagine that if Sepp Blatter, at the end of the day, feels that, you know, as the captain of the ship, even though there is no question that we're suggesting that Sepp Blatter is in any way implicated in these allegations, nothing to indicate that at the moment. And so what we're saying is he may have to feel he takes total responsibility as the head of the organisation. If he goes, Prince Ali is the only candidate left, and we are a supporter of Prince Ali. So, you know, the English FA here could have played a very smart game just by standing up against an organisation which Greg Dyke has described in the past as being, you know, inherently corrupt.
Yeah, but is it the problem, though, if the English FA gets involved in this voting process, if everybody gets involved in this voting process and it goes ahead, it will just be the same old cobblers, won't it? Because looking at the indictment, right, here's one of the charges which is made about the 2011 FIFA presidential election. It's about Jack Warner, who's the guy who gave himself up a few hours ago.
An unbelievable
He wasn't arrested in Switzerland.
No, he gave himself...
He was down in Trinidad, Trinidad and Tobago. He's been freed on $2.5 million bail, I think. Here's what it says. Jack Warner allegedly tried to buy votes for the 2011 FIFA presidential election for a member of the Asian Football Federation. The report says he invited voting members to a hotel room where Caribbean Football Union staff handed each official an envelope bearing the name of the member association that he represented. Inside each envelope was $40,000 in US currency.
Yeah, that is a well-documented story, isn't it, from the past? And it was roundly denied by Mr. Warner at the time. He's given himself up because he says that he has an explanation for everything that's gone on. He's always... I've seen him interviewed 2 or 3 times over the years, and he's always, after the first question, snapped, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not talking to you, I'm going to aggression. Right. Can I just raise another point, which I think is very, very significant here, and that is the reaction from Russia. Because Russia are now the centre of the investigation into how they were awarded the World Cup 2018 at the same meeting where Qatar were awarded the World Cup 2022. Yeah. Now, Russia are an incredibly unstable political regime in the world at the moment, as evidenced by what's happening in the Ukraine.
Yeah, and the way that they're responding to, various sort of pressures coming from the West.
Absolutely right. They've already said that as far as they're concerned, this is America sticking its nose in where it's not wanted.
Yes. They more or less accused them of imperialism, haven't they?
They have. Russia have already insinuated that this is America having a go at the parts of the world they don't like, i.e. Russia, i.e. Middle East, where, they have oil interests and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's an incredibly dangerous time geopolitically, because if the World Cup is taken off Russia, how do you think a man like Mr. Putin would react to what would be a massive snub and a massive denial of what he sees as a huge platform for his country to demonstrate their organisational and footballing prowess? He will go bonkers.
He will.
And it's
because
impossible.
for him it will be, at that time, 3 years from now, it will just about be the sort of icing on the cake of his sort of ruling of Russia.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And then you have to say to yourself, how would a man like Mr. Putin respond to what he sees as the world ganging up on him? He'll start fighting back in some way, in some form or some fashion. Yeah. I think it's very, very worrying.
Yeah, it could be very, very serious. And we don't know where this investigation is going to go.
Your voice all right?
No, my voice is fine. What we do know, though, is that we're going to be talking to Brian Loretta, who's in New York, and he's going to keep us updated with any developments that might be happening coming up. But let's hear from Ray Wilkins, who you just mentioned, and what he thinks about this FIFA election process.
Prince Ali there will be sitting there thinking, well, hang on a second. And he would do a great job, Al. He's geared to helping children around the world and putting money where it should be put. And I think he would do a magnificent job.
That, as you were saying, is Butch Wilkins, who very much is on Prince Ali's side. Yeah. Now, an incredible number of sort of items that we have to get through tonight. But one of the questions I want to ask you as well is a bit more about when you were at the FA.
Yes.
And how much sort of interference, if you like, FIFA has in the general sort of day-to-day running of the English Football Association.
Yeah. Many, many years ago, when I was a kid, it was about 1963.
Well, I don't want you to do it now, though.
Sorry?
I have to look at the time. I don't want you to do it now.
You see, you're always worrying about the time.
I'm
getting to my full flow. You asked me to explain something.
The world is in crisis.
The world is in crisis, and I'm trying to solve the crisis, and all you're worried about is the blinking clock.
The clock's ticking on FIFA, I can tell you that.
I tell you what, mate,
about the time as well.
Time could be ticking for you.
Time was ticking for everybody. We are the two Mikes. More coming up.
On digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. Talk Sport.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He's Mike Parry. We are the two Mikes. There's loads more coming up, of course, on this FIFA special that we're doing because the story just goes on and on and on. It's got so many strands. It's got so many different pieces to it. Mr. Parry's going to be telling us some more later on about his time at the FA and how FIFA's kind of dead hand, if you like, perhaps influenced an awful lot of things that went on in English football. Because when people say, Mike, oh, well, this is just FIFA, they're always going to be like this. This is the way it goes. As you quite rightly said earlier, this is about grassroots football. It's about kids playing football in developing countries. It's about the internal kind of independence, really, of ordinary football associations like the FA in this country, and what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. But before I ask you about that, let me just play you a little bit from Matt Apuzzo, who is from the New York Times. He's the guy that actually broke the story, and he was asked if Sepp Blatter could survive as FIFA president.
From a legal standpoint, right now he has survived it, but his lawyers have got to be telling him, that this is a problem for him. I mean, the folks, the contacts I've talked to in law enforcement, I've asked them point blank, what do you think is going to happen to Sepp Blatter? And the answer is sort of like, well, we got to kind of see where the investigation goes from here. Oftentimes, this is this first wave is the first step. Now, the question is, do any of these 14 people who were charged, and definitely the people in FIFA who were just recently arrested, do they have anything they can give up on higher-ranking people? That's textbook federal law enforcement. That's how you take down a racketeering enterprise. So if Sepp Blatter has corruption problems, if he had corruption problems yesterday, he's got real problems today.
Amazing, really, by talking about taking down a racketeering enterprise. I mean, it's literally like talking about dismantling Al Capone, John Gotti.
It is,
you know, and as you say, Bugsy Siegel, all rolled into one.
It is.
And this is the World Football Organisation.
It is. Let's just look at FIFA's response today from a PR point of view, okay? What they decided to do very early on was to try and turn a negative into a positive. Yeah. But it was such a handbrake U-turn, it's been greeted ludicrously around the world as you know, firefighting with no water in your pipe, you know what I mean, in your pump and whatever. But do you know the first thing that went wrong? Did you see the guy who's the FIFA spokesman, head of media at FIFA, Walter de Gregorio?
Yeah, I saw him, yeah.
What was your impression when you saw him?
He looked like a man that didn't want to be there. He looked like a man that was under huge pressure not to kind of admit to anything whatsoever.
I mean, first of all, his expression, you know, the president, that's Sepp Blatter, is not dancing in his office. Yeah. It was almost a negative response. Right. It was almost like saying he's very glum and he's very down, which he would be, of course, with these allegations swirling around him. But to suggest that he ever would be dancing in his office, you see what I mean? Right. Like, oh, well, you know, when we strike huge deals for hundreds of millions of pounds, that's when the president dances in his office. But can I say one thing about Walter de Gregorio? And I'm not saying this churlishly, I'm not trying to get a laugh. He looked just not the part of what you needed today as a PR spokesman. Right. Now, if you think...
And that's very important, what you look like.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying he's got a very chiselled face. Yeah. And he's, you know, for want of a better word, he's not a good-looking man. Now, if you wanted to present a fantastic image to the world... No, it is harsh, I agree, but I'm being absolutely factual here. When I looked at him, I thought, that guy looks like somebody I'm not sure I trust.
He looks a bit shifty, is what you're saying.
A bit shifty. I'm not saying that he's a dishonest man or anything like that, but I'm saying he was having difficulty putting over his message. When you think, for instance, that our Prime Minister, David Cameron, who's just won an election, right, part of his appeal is he looks very smooth. He's a good-looking chap. It's no wonder that his first job when he came out of Oxford University with a first-class honours degree was as a PR spokesman for a television company, right? Because that's the sort of image that companies want to portray. Yeah. Mr. de Gregorio did not present that image today in a crisis situation.
But you can say the same thing all the way to the top. I mean, Sepp Blatter does not exactly look like a guy that's running a multi-billion-dollar organisation, does he? I mean, he looks like a Bond villain. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, he does.
Let's talk to Brian Loretta. He's over in New York City. Yeah. He's a man who's done work with the New York Times before as well. Brian, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mikes. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, very well indeed.
Very well,
this is a fantastic thing. People are now saying over in this part of the world that the Americans haven't been this popular since the 1940s because everybody's now cheering that the Americans have suddenly been the country to possibly change the way that football is run in the entire world.
Well, absolutely. You know, it's there's two parts of this whole thing, as I'm going to be writing about, you know, in the days ahead. I mean, yes, this investigation is huge. It's going to hopefully uncover a lot of people's questions and long-time held suspicions that they've had over FIFA. I mean, no one's ever thought this was a squeaky clean organization. And, you know, and if you just watch Sepp Blatter's Twitter feed and then just read everyone's comments below everything he writes, it's unbelievable. That being said, you know, the more discouraging thing about this whole thing, and this is a big picture problem, is that there's a good portion of the world that still loves Sepp Blatter and still thinks of him almost as a hero, particularly in like the smaller developing nations, and they don't view as what's been going on with FIFA all these years as any big part of a problem. So then you have this investigation, but then you also have to kind of win the hearts and minds to probably transform FIFA into a better organization. I mean, if you don't win the hearts and minds of this of the worldwide audience, which is no one's really talking about that. But if you don't win that over, you could replace Sepp Blatter and all the executive committee, and what's going to come next is going to be maybe just as bad. You know, it's a systematic, structural problem, I think, with FIFA.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, I want to ask you a question, please. Have America done this because they do genuinely have a moral fibre and a moral code where they want to clean up corruption, and therefore they're acting, again, as the world's policeman to try and rid us of evil? Or is it because this is huge business, huge amounts of money, and America is the biggest business country in the world, and therefore it's in their interests to make sure business is run properly?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, they try to stamp out corruption, and I think FIFA has kind of been egregious in that, and I think that when you saw the press conference today, they made that very clear. I mean, those are very, very strong terms used by the Attorney General and FBI Director. I mean, they made no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, they said this was inherently corrupt to the core. I mean, that's you don't toss those words around lightly. And that being said, yes, the United States wants to get involved when there's huge conglomerates that are worth billions of dollars. I mean, soccer is a huge business here in the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of money that the broadcasters are spending just to host these television host these tournaments is unbelievable too. And then also you have to remember CONCACAF, which is our region, is pretty much ground zero in terms of all these investigations when you look at all the people who've been indicted.
Yeah, and everything seems to have gone through the United States. I don't know whether anybody's talked about this in the last 24 hours or so, Brian, but obviously watching Loretta Lynch and all of the prosecutors talking yesterday for us, they were seemingly quite clear that they were not trying to dismantle FIFA as such, but they were just going after people that they believe are guilty of these various crimes. But I seem to remember a few weeks ago, was there not an announcement that Fox TV had done a deal with FIFA to televise the World Cup over, I think it was, after Qatar, and there was some sort of questions about how that deal had been done?
Yeah, there's huge questions about how that deal was done. I mean, because, Fox has a lot of say. They spend billions and billions and billions of dollars to televise these World Cups. Then all of a sudden, it wasn't known to them when they were bidding for the 2022 World Cup that it was going to be in the winter, not the summer. So they had a huge complaint because, usually you block off June, July to televise this tournament. Now all of a sudden you're being asked to block off November, December, and they're very busy in those months. They have a lot of conflicts in those months. So I guess to keep Fox and their big money that they had invested in the game, to keep them at peace and at bay, the general belief is the consensus is that they were doing that. They were giving Fox this no competitive bid to host to televise the 2026 games, so that they wouldn't complain about the 2022 getting moved in the calendar year.
That's right. And Brian, can I ask you this as well? Do you think a trigger for this, because it's been an investigation which has been going on for many years, but do you think that the actual move that the FBI have made could have been triggered by the Michael Garcia report, an independent report presented to FIFA, which FIFA had commissioned, which said, actually, there's a high level of corruption inside your organisation, which was then turned round inside FIFA by a guy called Eckert and published as though there wasn't corruption inside FIFA?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a very likely scenario, but I also think the strongest possibility is that the FIFA, this whole chain of events probably got started by Chuck Blazer. He turned, everyone's known now for quite some time that he's been an FBI informant, and at a time when he was working for CONCACAF. And now all of us, I mean, he's a guy who is very, very high up, very, very entrenched. And if you think about the fact that CONCACAF has been ground zero for this FIFA investigation, and that Chuck Blazer at one time was one of the most powerful guys in CONCACAF, and he turned to be an FBI informant, I think you're kind of connecting the dots here that, speculation and wondering what triggered this probably has to start with Chuck Blazer, and then everything else was just kind of icing on the cake.
Sure, absolutely right. Brian, listen, thanks very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us. Brian Chiarella over in New York there telling us about how the investigation kind of got kicked off. And Blazer, of course, is the guy who has turned state's evidence, as they say, and has become a massive part of this puzzle.
But I think Chuck Blazer did it largely on conscience, didn't he?
Oh, he did?
I think I don't think we're suggesting here that he suddenly decided to turn Queen's evidence looking for leniency. No. I think it was on conscience when he was working with people like Jack Warner, who he, many, many times questioned the behaviour of, which now, of course, is under investigation.
And there's a lot of people on Twitter rather unkindly, given what you said about the FIFA man, the spokesman, saying that actually Chuck Blazer and yourself bear a little bit of a resemblance.
Well, people have been putting that on Twitter all day today. It's the bushy beard, but I haven't got a bushy beard anymore. Listen...
Hang on, before I do anything else, let's hear more from Matt Aputo. He's the guy who broke the story for the New York Times. This is what he says about where the investigation goes now.
What's going to happen next is the people who were arrested in Zurich overnight or early this morning will ultimately face a court hearing, an extradition hearing, to decide whether they can be extradited to stand trial in New York. Under the treaty that Switzerland has with the United States, Swiss authorities have some discretion about when to extradite people on tax charges, but on straight criminal charges, the treaty is pretty clear that they're supposed to turn people over. You can tell from the cooperation the Swiss government had early this morning in carrying out the arrests and the searches and their own investigation, that they seem to be working hand in glove with the Americans. So I don't think the Swiss government is going to throw up any sort of political roadblocks to an extradition. So once that process plays itself out, these guys will get put on a plane and would be charged formally in a federal courthouse in Brooklyn, New York.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. We are the two Mikes. It's a FIFA crisis special because FIFA, make no mistake, is absolutely in crisis. And Mike, you were talking about Rupert Murdoch there just before the news.
Yeah.
And two of his papers this morning have made no mistake about what is the most important story of the day.
Absolutely.
World Cup of fraud, all over the front page of the Times.
Yeah.
And the Sun have done it that way as well.
Yeah, they have. And I think that's because Mr. Murdoch's interests internationally are so extensive, spanning from newspapers in which are publishing these stories to some of the biggest media organisations in the world, like Fox TV, that he has to be, inevitably immersed in the whole thing. What I think is so interesting is that the non-Murdoch press as well have taken a huge interest in it. For instance, take the Daily Mail, okay? Yeah. And Charlie Sales, an outstanding journalist who, who's been on this case for years and years and years. And
he'll have been to plenty of World Cups, as you have been, and you'll have seen plenty of stuff as well.
I've been to plenty of World Cups with him, and you've seen the way things work. I mean, one of the things that you always see at these tournaments, by the way, is the extremely lavish facilities that FIFA award themselves.
Yeah.
So
they took over an entire hotel in Rio, didn't they?
They took over Park Lane in this country. They took over Park Lane in this country when Mr. Blatter came here just to have a look at what we had to offer when we were bidding to win the 2018 World Cup. That's right. You know, he went to Wembley. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And they closed off Park Lane.
Yeah.
They gave FIFA the whole of the Dorchester Hotel. These are the sort of measures.
Have you not told the story as well about, I don't know if it was a Champions League Cup final that you went to where they had a red carpet for his car to drive on. Never mind for him to walk on.
I tell you what it was, honestly, it was, and in fact, old MVP, is it? Our colleague here, NRP.
NRP.
MVP's
most valuable player. He sometimes gets awarded with that, depending on what he does.
No, NRP,
on a day-to-day
his name is Nick, who's one of our editors out here, right? He was with me. We went up to the Olympic Stadium in Rome.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is where you ended up falling down the cliff.
I fell down the cliff, but that's another story. But I fell down the cliff because of Mr. Blatter.
Yeah.
Because what happened was
you weren't allowed in the normal way.
We got there. We tried to get there early enough, about an hour and a half before the game, and we walked up the normal route towards where we were going to get our seats, and suddenly the road was closed off.
Right.
And we said, "What's going on?" And it was all in Italian, and then the next thing we know, all these barriers have gone up, and a bloke is walking down the road, rolling out a red carpet on the road, not on the pavement, on the road. And that red carpet was for Mr. Blatter's car. Yeah. And so Mr. Blatter's convoy arrives, it stops, he gets out, then there's another red carpet rolled out into the entrance to the ground. We, as a consequence, had to walk 1.5 miles because of it's situated in a bowl, the Olympic Stadium in Rome, and you have to go round and up hills, and that's how I fell off a hill and all that kind of stuff. But, I mean, what I'm saying is, everywhere you go, they are treated like royalty. And the reason they're treated like royalty...
It's because they demand it, presumably.
They demand it, but the reason they get it is because they lavish so much wealth to poor countries... To help them improve their football, but it helps improve the whole economy of the country. Sure. That's what it's all about.
And one of the things about the Brazilian World Cup and all the demonstrations that took place before it happened was that the people of Brazil were unhappy that the FIFA sort of, directions and regulations for Brazil to host the World Cup meant that they had to spend so much money on transportation, much money on building stadiums and all of this. And the people said that this was out of all proportion because the thing about World Cups, of course, as you know, is that FIFA always make a massive profit.
Oh, yeah, they always make a huge profit, and then they solely distribute it. What is interesting...
Tell us about Charlie Sale. What did he say?
Well, I was going to say, all these headlines, how can Blatter survive? FIFA chiefs are charged over bribery and corruption. This is the World Cup of fraud, says US investigator. Grabbed by the sleaze bosses. I'm looking at all the headlines now.
The Shane game on the front page of The Independent with a picture of Blatter with his head in his hands. The game's up in front of the Telegraph Sport.
World Cup of fraud in the Times. The Guardian have gone huge on it. The stench of corruption. But the interesting thing is, the one paragraph that leaps out and hits you in the face is the big question in a lot of the papers is, can Blatter survive? Yeah. And the answer is, this is the irony of the whole situation, Mike. Mr. Blatter is not under investigation for now. He is the great survivor of sports politics, and unless evidence is unearthed of direct personal misconduct, he could survive again.
Yeah.
that makes him culpable or totally ignorant of what happens in his organisation. Neither are good credentials, you might think, but this is FIFA.
Yeah.
And that just about sums it up.
And the Daily Mirror have got a piece by Gary Lineker, and a piece on the front that says, how can Blatter stay in charge of FIFA? It's time to break away. And also, The Guardian, of all papers, the paper that you would least associate with football stories, really, the stench of corruption is their front page.
Yeah, that's right.
All over the front page, FIFA officials held in FBI swoop on Zurich hotel. Blatter ahead of World Cup of fraud, says the US. I mean, it's extraordinary stuff, isn't it?
It's absolutely massive stuff, but it is the biggest fraud investigation in an organisation of this size.
Yeah.
And I tell you something else as well.
Yeah.
And you know, you wouldn't say this blithely because of the horror it evokes, but this is the biggest football story since the Munich air disaster of 1958.
Yeah.
That one rocked the world, seriously rocked the world, and the world has never recovered, or the world's never been the same, should I say, since then. And I don't think the world will ever be the same here. What I was going to tell you earlier was that I remember in 1963, it was the centenary FA Cup final, because it was formed in 1863. That was when the rule book was drawn up, OK? And I remember Sir Stanley Rouse went to that one because he was paying, tribute.
He was the sort of gentleman head of FIFA.
Well, this is I was about to say. Now, he was responsible for the 1966 World Cup coming to this country because the FA was celebrating 100 years of football in '63. That was within the bidding period. In those days, it wasn't 6 years. I think it was 3. And so he was largely regarded as having brought it, and we got the Jules Rimet Trophy. But after that, the world decided that England had too much of a grip on the game. The mother country had started to become destabilised by the fact that the Hungarians had come to Wembley and battered England 10-4.
And this is kind of what Tim Vickery was getting at earlier on.
Exactly. And all of a sudden then it was decided power had to be spread around the world, and Sir Stanley Rouse was felled in a coup. Right. And of course we never got anywhere, literally never got anywhere near to power in football organisations, either at FIFA or UEFA, ever since. One thing I wanted to say...
Blatter's been at FIFA since 1975.
Unbelievable, in one form or another.
Yeah, president since 98, I believe.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say to you, Mike, and you'll have a better view on this than me, right? In the last 2 or 3 years, the Metropolitan Police have had a squad of up to 300 men investigating allegedly corrupt journalists.
Yeah.
Most of whom, 95% of whom, have been cleared in trials. Some of whom have been...
Millions and millions have been spent on it as well.
Over £30 million has been spent on the investigation, right? And for all of it, I think only 3 or 4 journalists have been prosecuted on really bizarre charges, like misconduct in a public office, a charge that's never been levied since the last century.
Right.
In fact, since the 19th century.
Century before last.
The century before last. Really bizarre. And the point I'm making here is that this is all about vast amounts of money. And America moved on it, as we heard from an American correspondent, moved on it because it affects the American economy if corrupt money is sloshing around within the business world of America.
Right.
Doesn't most money at some stage or another come through the City of London, which is still the world's top financial centre? And if that's the case, isn't the Metropolitan Police Force big enough to have people who maybe should have been aware that some of this money was not clean money?
Well, the equivalent of what would do that in this country would be the Serious Fraud Office, right? And the Serious Fraud Office has famously had a whole, litany of wasted cases, badly prosecuted cases. They've been hopeless at trying to track down, anyone who's been absconded with money, anyone they mostly get done in America or they get done in some other part of the world, because the Serious Fraud Office has been, probably not fit for purpose for many years. But the reason why the Americans have been able to do this is because they passed a law which made it possible for them to prosecute non-American citizens who had any dealings with the American banking system or even the internet or anything like that that touches America. And that's how they've managed to do it. And this was only law that was passed relatively recently because of the anti-terror stuff.
They can still drag people from England who are said to have in some way defrauded somebody in business in America.
That's right.
Drag them over there. There's been several high-profile cases.
There was one recently in Texas, wasn't there?
That's right. And just jail the guy because he had dealings with an American company.
Yeah.
It's all absolutely fascinating stuff, and I'm sure this investigation will go on for years, not just weeks or months, for years.
As you said earlier, Loretta Lynch said we started this 24 years ago.
Absolutely.
It might be going for another 24 years.
And by the way, what an impressive woman that woman is. If she ran for president of the United States of America, she'd get in tomorrow. And do you know what? You look at her background, I have looked at it, it's absolutely fascinating. This woman is the...
Say the time, by the way.
Don't worry about the time when I'm being fascinating.
I'm worried about the time. You're being fascinating.
No, I'm being absolutely fascinating. This woman is the daughter of a Baptist preacher teacher and a librarian mother from South Carolina who made her way to Harvard University and then built her career in law. What a fascinating woman. Wonderful.
Yeah. Didn't go to the University of Trent, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
We are the two Mikes. He's Mike Parry, I'm Mike Gray. We've got loads more coming next.
The only way it can lead its way out of this crisis is a truly independent process of reform led by an external body, a trusted and respected body that could investigate without fear and favour and go properly into the organisation and do that and cooperate with the external agencies who are investigating too. Now, if they could do that, if they could suspend the presidential elections until that process is completed, make clear to Sepp Blatter that he's not wanted as a candidate anymore, if they can do that, then there's a chance they could pull it out the bag. But if they fail to do that, I think we could see the end of FIFA and a new world governing body happen to be created afresh.
That's Damien Collins, Conservative MP, supporter of a new FIFA for the world governing body of football. But I mean, that's the big question, I suppose, as well, isn't it? Is Greg Dyke going to Zurich to just take part in an election? Is he going to go there and try and lobby for people to say no, we're not going to take part in the election? You know, we'll find out, I guess, tomorrow whether the election goes ahead. But the other big question is about the corporate sponsors, isn't it? I saw McDonald's have come out and said that they're very concerned about these latest developments. Adidas have just issued a statement saying we will continue to encourage FIFA to become more transparent.
As you said a few minutes ago, what are the two biggest platforms for corporate reach in the world?
Yeah, well, there's only two. I mean, I was watching an advertising specialist earlier on one of the news programmes, and he said basically there's only two global events now where you can reach the entire planet in one hit, and that's the World Cup and the Olympics. And so, you know, for companies like Adidas and McDonald's, I guess it's the biggest place where they can reach everyone.
Sure. I think what the sponsors got to watch for, Mike, is this. If they suddenly pull out and say, right, not supporting you and all that, we have to assume that within FIFA there are some good people. Yeah. Right? So if the good people suddenly survive and you know, and they really do get the bad apples out of the barrel, and the good people survive, then the good people might turn around and say, well, in our hour of need, you know, when we actually needed some credibility, which you destroyed by pulling out and leaving us without any sponsors and without any support, we're not very happy on you coming back. So they've got to be very careful.
Talking to with Tim Vickery, I mean, the other danger, of course, is that, say, Sepp Blatter decides to step down. I'm not sure that he ever will. Yeah. But at some point or other, he steps aside. We will still have a FIFA which is constructed very much anti-Europe, where, you know, as I said, only something like 50-odd delegates from Europe, 160 plus from the rest of the world. Yes. You know, the rest of the world will still then have a kind of the say on how it's all run.
Very much so. And you have to remember that presumably there's a plan underway, maybe until today. Jose Havelange stepped down and his groomed successor was Sepp Blatter. Yeah. Surely Sepp Blatter now, because of the way that organisation's run, has for several years been grooming his own successor in his own image. Right. A bit the same way as Mr. Putin in Russia grooms his successor and all that. One story I want to tell you...
do wonder with somebody like Sepp Blatter whether he'd get himself cryogenically frozen at some point so that he could just run it forever.
I totally agree with you.
He's got a separate sort of Sepp Blatter in an ice-box somewhere.
Well, we're talking about how dangerous Mr. Putin can be when he's ruffled, you know, when his feathers are ruffled, and how he could be, you know, somewhat unpredictable. Do you remember when Mr. Putin had to accord to his own rules to step down as president of Russia?
And he became Prime Minister.
He just became Prime Minister for a few years, put a stool pigeon into, and then went back. 5 years are over. But one story I was going to tell you about FIFA, which you reminded me about the sort of organisation they are. When I was associated with the Football Association, we wanted to put on an exhibition. And part of the exhibition, you know, involved graphics and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. To get the clip of Jeff Hurst's goal that came down off the bar, was it over the line or wasn't over the bar, totalling about 15 seconds... Yeah. They wanted to charge us 20 grand.
Really?
Yeah.
What, FIFA did?
Yeah.
So they own the copyright of all of that
stuff? They own the copyright of every World Cup game that's ever been played, right? And if you ever see it shown anywhere, it's money in the
So even if it's used, because they've used it in adverts and all sorts of things, haven't they?
I'm telling you, it's the most expensive piece of footballing copyright in the world, that Jeff Hurst one, because it was the goal that never was and all that kind of stuff. And you would have thought that, you know, with the football associations around all being members of FIFA, that you could sort of go to FIFA and go to FIFA's library and say, you know, could I borrow that clip? No. You know, can I have that clip?
And, I mean, how easy is it to deal with them as an organisation? You get the sense when you see that building in Zurich, on the outskirts of Zurich, which is on a whole...
Neon.
Yeah, private estate, right?
That's right.
You know, you're not driving there unless you're going to the FIFA building. You know, I mean, it looks literally like a sort of the headquarters of Spectre.
No, it looks like Scientology headquarters.
Yeah, or something like that. I mean,
it is exactly the same.
I mean, presumably they got their own private guards, they've probably got a private army.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're dealing with people inside FIFA, how easy is that?
Well, you mostly deal with them by phone, of course, and all that, but you never get through to the person you want to speak to. That's for absolutely sure. And you can never write or text the sort of person you want.
Right.
It's very difficult.
It's amazing that they can still run like that in this day and age.
It might be a Swiss thing, Mike. It might be a Swiss thing. If I can just compare it to my Rolex watch.
Yes.
When I wanted to get my Rolex watch...
It's not a fake Rolex.
No.
This is the real one you're talking about.
Of course, the real
there were a
one.
couple of people actually alleging that you might have to give the watch back. I don't know what they were meaning about that.
No.
I'm sure it wasn't handed to you by somebody at the FIFA organisation.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Right.
But I just wanted to say to you, when I had a problem with the Rolex, it needed something called a new bevel. I don't know what that is.
A new bevel?
Yeah, new bevel,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
And apparently it's the rim of the glass and all that kind of stuff. I went to Rolex HQ in, I think it's Smith Square in London.
Okay.
No, it's St James Square. St James Square. It's near St James.
Round the back of St James's Park.
That's right, absolutely, yeah. And Rolex building... First of all, there's a camera there to make sure that you are who you are, and then the door opens, and you go in. The door slams. It's slide shut. It's electronic. Slide shut behind you, and then you go in and you see a scientist, right? And I
scientist.
He's a scientist.
How do you know he's a scientist?
Because he's got a white coat on. He sits. He sits. I'm not joking. I don't know what you're laughing at. He sits behind a desk.
He's got a white coat. Might be a butcher.
No. He's got an eyepiece. You know, one of those things that jewellers have, right?
Yeah.
And
so he's a jeweller then.
Well, he's a jeweller, yeah, but he's a scientist as well, because he looks at your watch and all that. First of all, they make sure, A, it's a genuine Rolex.
And it's not fake,
B, it's not been stolen, because every Rolex has got its own individual number. They can tell if it's stolen or anything.
Yeah. Like serial number.
Yeah, serial number and all that kind of stuff. And then when I explained what the problem was, he said, OK. And all he said to me was, come back in 6 weeks. Yeah. That was it. They kept the watch.
He didn't even tell you how much it was going to cost.
He didn't tell me anything at all. And it was
I guess they assume if you've got a Rolex, you can afford it.
They're a very secretive organisation. But the point I'm making...
How much did it cost in the end?
About £360.
To fix a watch?
Yeah. Well, I think that was expensive. I thought it might have cost more. But anyway, the point I'm making is... Is that why FIFA are based in Switzerland? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because for years and years and years, we've been told about the secrecy of the Swiss banks.
Yeah.
And so if there's a secret culture in Switzerland where people deposit their money, I mean, we still think that there's German Nazi money hidden in Swiss banks.
Well, Nazi gold, yeah. Funnily enough, though, one of the break points for the relationship between Swiss bankers and their private clients was broken. And I know this because of the people I know that used to work in the financial business in New York. That basically, suddenly, the secrecy of Swiss bank accounts was blown wide open because people like Loretta Lynch, have found out that actually if you're operating in America and you are secretly hiding money from the US tax authorities, we can go after you no matter where that money is. And they got subpoenas to open up the Swiss bank accounts. And so suddenly all the Swiss banks pulled out of America. And they're like, we're not going to operate there anymore because we can't protect our clients.
Absolutely. And the point I'm making here, and people might think it's a bit bizarre to be talking about Rolex watches, is that why would FIFA, when it was growing up, base itself in Switzerland and not in, for instance, Brazil, who've won more World Cups, in Germany, which are the most successful European nation, in Southeast Asia, which has a booming economy, in Singapore or something like that. Why did they go to Switzerland?
Well, I think you know the answer.
I think they went to Switzerland because there is a culture of secrecy there which is not challenged by the Swiss government, and therefore the Swiss government, in a way, in my view, may be partly responsible for the emergence of FIFA as a secretive organisation able to pursue these corrupt deals which are now under investigation behind closed doors.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, I've got a text here. We've got loads of texts and tweets and things. We haven't read too many out. Let's read one of them out here. Ben says this. Mike and Mike, before too much euphoria breaks out regarding the USA's action today against FIFA, just consider that the likely ultimate outcome will be to perpetuate Blatter-style FIFA regimes through the alienation of all the third world footballing countries who have been genuinely and massively helped by Blatter. These countries with a history of oppression by the West will see the USA's action today as very high-handed and politically motivated. Well, Ben, I don't agree with that, actually,
no, I don't
because
either.
I think in the end, the third world, as you refer to it, the developing world, as we prefer to say now, have got control of FIFA. And if FIFA remains the way that it currently is, then they will continue to have control of FIFA because there's no way that's going to change.
Yeah, with the greatest respect to Mr. Warner, right, who's given himself up in Trinidad tonight,
right?
He is from the third world.
Yeah,
in footballing terms,
developing world, we'd like to say.
Yeah, the developing world in footballing, in political, in economic terms.
And of course, before all of this happened, he was saying busily that he'd given up the business of football and that he was just busy now helping people.
That's right. Yeah,
a bit like yourself. All he does is help people.
Yeah. Well, you know, I try to extend the hand of friendship and all that. But I mean, the main issue is that now the can of worms has been opened. I think the world should be grateful, very, very grateful to America.
I agree.
Who's been oft criticised as being arrogantly the world's policeman in military terms and political terms. Yeah. Now they have become the world's policeman in financial terms, but it's an industry that they're examining which affects more people in the world than any other industry. Yeah. Football is the biggest global industry, the biggest global interest in the world.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to certainly look forward to some of these documents that they've taken out of FIFA's headquarters to find out what's actually in them, because I think in this day and age, an organisation that does run something as important as the football business in the world should not be run secretively, should not be run in a way which is not transparent, and we should all have access to it. We are the two Mikes. He's Mike Parry, I'm Mike Graham. We've got loads of other things to talk about, of course, and most powerful women in the world coming up next.
Talk Sport.
And it's in!
A diving header at the end of a 50-yard run.
From the root to the tip.
Talk Sport.
Talk Sport Extra Time. We are the two Mikes. There will be a podcast coming out. It'll be an extended podcast, of course, this morning, because we're here for 3 hours instead of the normal 2. We've got loads of other stuff to talk about. We've got lots of texts and emails on the FIFA front. We'll come back to it a little bit later on in the show. But Mr. Parry is insisting to me that he can make some other points on some other very crucial stories that are doing the rounds this morning. You want to talk about women, don't you? Not for the first time.
Only because it's connected to the woman who is the hero of the moment. Yeah. You know, I mean, isn't it ironic that it's taken a woman, the Attorney General in America, you know, who so impressed me today. I mean, I couldn't believe the way she stood up and delivered her facts so, you know, succinctly. Yeah. Loretta Lynch, the US Attorney General, she hasn't been Attorney General for that long either.
No, she's only just been appointed.
So she took over an investigation that's been going on for nearly 20 years, and she had every fact at her fingertip when she was asked about it, you know, and then the rest came on. But funny enough, that comes on a day when I saw the issuing of a list of the world's most powerful women. Yes. The most powerful woman in the world.
This is the one that got Taylor Swift on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, right?
46. Yeah. She's 46 on the list of the world's most powerful women. First, of course, you won't be surprised to know, is Angela Merkel.
Is it, yeah?
And second is Hillary Clinton.
Is it? What, above Michelle Obama?
Above Michelle Obama. Now, you could say that Hillary Clinton, obviously if she becomes president of the United States of America, will easily be the most powerful woman in the world. Yeah. Because she'll be the most powerful person in the world.
I don't think she will,
and you don't think she will?
I don't think America's ready to elect. As much as they've now got plenty of very high-profile women in politics, I'm not certain they're actually ready to elect a woman as president yet.
Well, I think they would elect a woman as president. I just don't think that it's going to be Hillary Clinton. Yeah. First of all, she's failed once. That doesn't always rule out a president. I mean, even Richard Nixon failed on one occasion in his first time he tried to become president of the United States. Right. But what I'm saying is she comes from a political dynasty, which I think the Americans are now tired of. Yeah. I think they're tired.
Also, they don't like her very much. I think that's the problem. I mean, there's plenty of sort of, you know, what I call the champagne-swilling Democrat types who on the East Coast of America who've got lots of money and live a very nice lifestyle. But the heartlands of America, I don't think they trust Hillary Clinton.
No, I don't think they do either. Also, I think that she really, really got people fed up in Bill Clinton's first term of office when she suddenly became something awfully, you know, more apparent than the First Lady.
Yeah.
I mean, she was
she was the one that came out and said, you get 2 for the price of 1,
Yeah, right? 2 for the price of 1. What do you think I am? Tammy Wynette? I don't just sit there and stand by my man.
Bake cookies and all that.
Yeah, cupcakes and stand by my man. But thirdly, she was then put in charge of trying to introduce a health welfare bill, which every Democrat, you know, since Roosevelt's been trying to introduce, and which Mr. Obama, to some extent, has now introduced. Yeah. But she failed completely to get that through.
She did.
Any sort of Capitol Hill
it was filibustered, was it not?
Yeah, filibustered indeed. Yeah. Now, what I was going to say is the idea of powerful women and all that. I mean, you know, you said to me all the time, you know, you've only ever gone out with secretaries and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's not untrue, that, is it?
Well, no, I don't suppose it isn't true, but I mean, you know, I've been out with an awful lot of ladies during my lifetime, and secretaries have been some of them. But
I don't think there's anything wrong with it, by the way.
But you do like powerful women.
Yeah.
You do like powerful. Yeah, of course you do, because you think, God, how strong they are, and you know, no matter what you say. John Lennon wrote a song once about Yoko Ono.
How
sorry.
Turn us into a conversation about John Lennon?
Because he wrote a song which said, "Woman is the," and I'm not going to use the third word, right? Of the world.
Woman is the what?
Woman is the of the world.
Okay.
And the third word.
This is not the song "Woman" from his last album.
No. It's "Woman is the," and the third word starts with an N. Okay. So he's trying to equate women to oppressed minorities. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
and he sung that, and to a large extent, I think he's right. I think it's still a man's world. But when you see people,
I don't agree with that.
Oh no, I think it is, mate. No, I think it is.
On what grounds do you say that then?
Well, on the grounds that most of the top positions in almost every profession and every political setup are held by men.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, they are.
Well, you just said Angela Merkel's the number one most powerful woman in the world.
Yeah, she's not the most powerful person in the world. That's Obama, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but she's running Europe, basically. She's not just running Germany.
I totally agree. And at one time, Mrs. Thatcher was one of the most powerful women in the world.
I mean, I'm sure lots of women would say to you, it's still quite difficult to get to the very top in any profession. But I don't think it's a man's world anymore.
Of course it is. For every one powerful woman you've got, I would say, 15, 16 powerful men.
Really?
In similar positions, yeah.
You've got Harry Harman as head of the Labour Party at the moment.
Yeah, but
might not say that's very powerful, mind you.
Well,
they haven't got much power.
A, they're in opposition. B, it's temporary because she said she's going to stand down as soon as the new leader of the Labour Party is elected. So, I don't see that as a great thing. But you see, I'm not sure that you could cope with powerful women. You accuse me all the time of not being able to cope with powerful women.
Well, you see, I don't put women in categories. Just between you and I.
Oh, really?
Is that I see a woman as for what she is. I don't regard her as either powerful, not powerful, a secretary, a lawyer.
Yes.
I just see her as a woman.
Yes.
And if I like her as a woman, and if she likes me, then that's fine. It doesn't matter whether she's powerful or not.
Yeah. Now, if you're US Attorney General, like Loretta Lynch is, that could be a launchpad to a political career, couldn't it?
Yes, it could indeed.
Because, I mean, although she's attorney...
Well, it was for Rudolph Giuliani, although it didn't really work out for him.
No, but you know who else it was for? It was for Robert Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy, yes.
It was JFK's brother. Yeah. He was the Attorney General.
You might say that he only became Attorney General because his brother gave him the job.
Oh, definitely, yes. But what I'm saying...
Nepotism rules.
What I'm saying is, when JFK went, who stood as president in the election after the next one?
Yeah, 1968.
It was
Robert.
Robert F. Kennedy, who unfortunately then got shot himself.
Yeah.
So, it was a tainted family, obviously, in that sort of respect.
But it was a very unlucky family.
All I'm saying is, this is such a high-profile story. Because if it was just another story about business corruption in America, nobody outside of America would have seen this woman perform today. But because it was FIFA, and because it's been going on for 23 years, and because most of the world are fed up with FIFA, storming around the world, doing their own thing, closing off roads everywhere they go, taking the best hotels everywhere they go, somebody wanted FIFA pulled down, and this woman has done it.
Yeah.
I believe she could be a leading light in the political future of the United States. I think she was terrific.
Maybe you should write her a letter.
Well, what would I write her a letter about?
Congratulating her
like
on,
a
first
fan
of all...
letter?
Yeah, like a fan letter, congratulating her on being one of the most powerful women in the world, and suggesting in your position as a former advisor to the FA that she should run for president.
Well, why not? And maybe I should say to her, and by the way, because of the time difference and all that, and the show that my mate Mike Graham and I do, what about a telephone interview sometime over the next week or so?
Let's do that.
And explain to us, it's not a bad idea, though, I'm going to try that, and explain to us exactly what your thinking pattern was when you decided to take this on.
Yeah, absolutely right.
It'd be interesting to see how the American public respond, because even though Tim said, it was our New York correspondent, Brian, said, football is a massive industry in America.
Well, guess who's over there at the moment? Manchester City are there. They're going to play a friendly, I think, in the next, if it's not tonight, it's tomorrow night. They've got Manchester United coming over very shortly. Chelsea will probably be over there at some point. I mean, the Premier League is now massive business over there.
Well, yes and no.
Yes and no, yes.
Well, they still haven't got an established league of their own in the whole of the United States. They haven't. No,
MLS is an established league. They get 60,000 people at the games.
Yeah, I know, but that'll soon peter out.
It won't peter out.
It happened in the 60s, it happened in the 70s.
No, you're wrong about that.
Pele went there, Franz Beckenbauer went there.
That wasn't done properly.
Yeah, well, exactly, it wasn't done properly.
Now they've got a very, very burgeoning and very money-making enterprise going on.
Now, what I have to say to you is, because you don't understand these things, and I do, is psychologically, power is not always... power does not always come from the title that sits on your name. So it's not just Attorney General United States, OK?
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, what?
It's whether or not people like her. The biggest power in this world is popularity. That is why...
That's not true.
It is.
Well, how about Vladimir Putin?
No, he's not popular.
Yeah, I know, but he's very powerful.
No,
there goes your argument.
No, it doesn't.
It does. He's not popular, but he's powerful.
He's only powerful inside of Russia.
You just said he's going to start the Third World War if they don't get to do the World Cup in 2018.
Well, I didn't quite say that, but I said he could cause big trouble.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, you're saying he's not powerful outside of Russia.
No, listen. What I'm saying...
Your argument's already falling down.
No, it's not falling down at all. He's only powerful inside Russia. He's not powerful for the rest of the world because he hasn't got the economic base.
He's just invaded Ukraine.
Yes, I know, and he can be a nuisance, but he's not powerful. Now, what I'm saying is...
A nuisance?
A nuisance,
That's one way to describe MiGs flying over your house.
What I'm saying is
You're such a nuisance. They've dropped another bomb on us next door.
The most powerful person in the world when she was alive was Diana, Prince of Wales.
Diana, Prince of Wales.
Diana, Princess of Wales. See, you're talking so much blinking nonsense. And I'm
She
getting
was not
confused.
powerful.
She was massively powerful.
No, she wasn't.
When she
was popular.
When she went to the White House and whispered in the president's ear, things got done.
Yeah, Reagan couldn't remember what anybody said to him.
When she went to Africa and said the landmine situation is a disgrace, we've got to get rid of them, government started moving in and taking up the landmines. Okay,
but she was not a powerful woman.
She was very powerful.
She had influence, which is not the same thing.
Who do you think the most powerful woman in America was when Michael Jackson was alive?
When Michael Jackson was alive?
Elizabeth Taylor.
Rubbish.
Elizabeth Taylor was the most powerful woman in America.
Don't talk rot.
She was the best friend, the best buddy of Michael Jackson.
You've gone mad.
The king of pop.
You've gone mad.
And B, because she dedicated her life to raising money for AIDS charities, headed up by Elton John. No, I'm telling you.
Elizabeth Taylor has never been the most powerful woman in America.
She was the most powerful woman in America. She was the most powerful woman in America.
Rubbish.
I know these things.
But you can't just keep saying it as if that makes it true.
I lived there and saw it happen. Anything she wanted done got done.
You might have thought she was the most powerful woman in America. Now, how about this from Becky down in New Zealand? She says, I've just added scientist to my CV. Under qualifications, I wear a white coat.
Is that supposed to be a joke?
Well, you said he was a scientist because he was wearing a white coat.
Well, scientists do wear white coats.
Well, so do butchers.
No, they don't.
So do the men that are coming to take you away. This is Talk Sport.
They're coming to take you away. Ha ha.
On DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM.
A terrific performance.
Turn of pace and eye for goal.
Shout about it.
Talk Sport.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. We are the two Mikes, and of course there will be a podcast coming out slightly longer than usual. We'll be getting back to the scandal that's hit FIFA a little bit later on in the show. But when we listen to that music, obviously there's an Everton related subject we're going to talk about, but a sad one this morning, Mike.
Oh, terribly sad. Andy King has died aged 58 of a heart attack.
Very young, right?
And and Andy King was just such a lovely guy. He came from Luton to Everton in the early 70s, post Everton winning the league championship in 1970, and he's most famous for scoring a winning goal in a derby, an Everton-Liverpool derby at Goodson Park. Was it Goodson Park? I'm sure it was Goodson Park. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. And he was being interviewed on the pitch by a radio reporter who ran on, and the policeman moved on and moved them off the pitch and said, "You've got to get off the pitch."
What, in the middle of the interview?
In the middle of the interview, as he was, and it's a classic bit of footage which you'll see in a television clip, I'm sure, on Breakfast tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's remembered for that. But he had long. He was a London boy in Liverpool.
He was at Everton for two different spells. I'm told.
Yes, he was. Yeah. But he was a London boy in Liverpool, so that made him very distinctive because Everton had a lot of local grown players in those days. You know, people like Joe Raw, Jimmy Husband, Alan Whittle had all come up through the ranks. John Hurst, Colin Harvey, Tommy Wright. They're all local boys, and so he was a bit different like that. But he always had a smile on his face. He was always telling jokes, cracking jokes. Last time I saw him, he had no hair.
Right.
And
I'm looking at a picture of him actually. When he was in caretaker charge of Northampton.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And he looks much different because he had quite long hair when he played football. Didn't he
had long blonde hair, and you called him Flossie and all that kind of stuff. And it's just so terribly sad at the age of 58, which is no age at all. He's died, prematurely, and a lot of tributes poured into him today, but. That's life. He didn't really have any great success in football after he finished playing.
No, it seems like he was a scout for quite a lot. He's been working most recently as an MK Dons chief scout.
Yes.
And he'd had some associations with managing smaller clubs like Waterford, Mansfield.
I know.
He'd done some scouting at Swindon.
Yeah. Poor lad.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because so many of those players, I suppose, from that era, don't move into as they do now into punditry, which is now almost as lucrative as being a manager. For some of them.
Yeah.
And I guess many of them just get forgotten about.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're absolutely right. And the other thing is that there are a lot of players who I know who used to play in that era who now earn a scant living from scouting. Scouts get paid, I'm not joking, Mike, about 30 grand a year. If they get £600 a week, including their travel expenses to go to a game or something like that, that's about it, you know what I mean?
And you wonder sometimes as well, given, certainly with the Premier League, scouting as such is a kind of a lost art, isn't it, for a lot of clubs? Because it seems to me that, say you're Brendan Rodgers, and you've got, whatever the mechanism is behind you at Liverpool for buying players, you're not really talking to an awful lot of scouts, I can't imagine. You're sort of talking to agents, and you're talking to business people, and somebody
it's
says,
funny
"Oh yeah, this guy from Sevilla,
Yeah.
by the way." We should say, I
Mm.
suppose. I mean, I actually managed to watch a bit of it last night, the Europa League final that Sevilla won for the 4th time, so they're in the Champions
That's
League.
right.
You know, people will probably just say, "Oh look, have a look at this guy who plays for Sevilla." It's not really like you're sitting down with a scout, is it?
The strangest thing is, one of the criticisms against David Moyes when he went to Manchester United was, well, where's his network of scouts?
Yeah.
Because a lot of scouts are like secret agents. You know, your club doesn't actually admit to having them as scouts, because when they turn up at a club in Europe, you know, people don't want to be seen to be representing Manchester United.
Right.
It immediately puts up the price of the player you're watching.
Sure.
So a lot of these guys are undercover. You know, a lot of these guys. I mean, do you remember Clough and Peter Taylor?
Yes.
When Peter Taylor went scouting for a player that they were interested in, he used to do it with a flat cap on, a hood over his flat cap, and he used to go and stand with the fans, you know, behind the goal
So
and all
nobody
that.
knew he was there.
So nobody knew he was there, and that's how he used to watch players. And that's the way scouting has to be done a lot of the time, because, you know, I've sat among scouts many, many times at football clubs. You're in one particular part of the stand, which is given over to, you know, sort of minor executives and that kind of stuff, and the scouts turn up. But on those occasions...
So can you spot them then, do you reckon?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you know, but on those occasions they're upfront about it. But what they're doing is they're actually scouting the team that their team are playing next. You see what I mean?
Right, yeah.
So that's quite acceptable, because you want to see how that team performs. So you don't have to undercover. But a lot of them, you're absolutely right. They go in incognito and they just sit amongst the fans, and that's how they watch it. And maybe he was doing that. But a mate of mine who used to play for Southampton and Sheffield Wednesday, he does a lot of scouting, and that's exactly what he does. He goes incognito, but he tells me honestly he gets, I think it's 400, 500, 600 quid plus his petrol money, and he runs a car which is,
and that doesn't happen presumably more than once a week or something.
Well, exactly, and he runs a car which is about 4 or 5 years old. You know, sometimes breaks down, all that kind of stuff. It's not a great life, but anyway,
it's not. Well, our condolences to Andy King's widow and the family.
Absolutely,
as well.
R.I.P. Andy King.
Terribly young age. Now, I've got something to say to you.
Oh yes, please do.
Which was something I spotted on Twitter earlier. You were talking about Angela Merkel and Europe and the power that she wields and all that. They've issued another one of these dictums about your health. And what they say is that drinking more than 4 cups of coffee a day could actually be harmful to you.
Who's issued this dictum?
This is the European Union.
Well, the European Union?
Yeah.
What's they got to do with it?
It's the EU Food Safety Agency.
Well, what have they got to do with my health?
Well, because they issue these guguidelines and these warnings, rather like the government here issue health guidelines and say, you shouldn't drink too much tea or you shouldn't drink too much of this
but
or that or the other.
when I need advice from a European person about my health, I might say to the European person, now look, pal, I don't advise you to go and
ami even.
Sorry?
Ami.
Ami?
Ami, it's, French for friend instead of pal.
Oh, mon ami, you mean? Yeah. Sorry.
Look here, mon ami.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, now, voulez-vous, mon ami, or whatever it is.
You must have done well at the Rugby World Cup with France.
I did, yeah.
Voulez-vous, mon ami.
Yeah, I did very well indeed.
Se trouve le duty-free.
Just shut up for a minute, really. Vin Rouge.
Vin Rouge, super play, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
But Vite.
Yeah, Vite, yeah, that was the Mick Jagger thing. What I'm saying is, I don't advise Mediterranean Europeans on their sleeping patterns. I don't advise them to go and lie down for 3 hours.
Well, you're always advising everybody in this country.
Hang on, 3 hours at lunchtime every day. So don't advise me on how much coffee I want to drink. Sorry?
Is that what you do?
What?
Lie down for 3 hours every day after
Hang on,
lunch.
I keep telling you, I find it the most bizarre lifestyle in the world to get up in the morning, do 2 hours work, have some lunch, then go and lie down for 3 hours, and then get up again and start work again. Is it any wonder that the word manana has passed into the English language, meaning not today, I'll do it tomorrow?
Exactly.
It's a word for no, can't be bothered. So, and the can't be bothered thing is reflected now in the Greek economy, the Spanish economy, the Italian economy. I'm just glad that we're not a manana country.
I don't think it's anything to do with siestas, though, is it?
Of course it is.
I think siestas are a great idea.
No, rubbish. If they're asleep for 3 hours a day, no business is getting done. If no business is getting done, nobody's earning money, no wealth is being created. The siesta has brought down countries like Greece, Italy, Spain. It has.
Calm down. You've been to plenty of football matches in places like Madrid, Barcelona, Rome. I mean, one of the things that I love about going to those cities in Europe is how vibrant they are so late into the night. You can walk down Las Ramblas in Barcelona at 10 o'clock at night.
Las Ramblas
at 10 o'clock at night.
What does that mean? The Rambles?
It's like the Rambles, yeah. I mean, it's where people walk, basically. Very big pickpocket situation there, by the way. If you go there, be very careful. But, I mean, the great thing is all the shops are open. You can go and buy yourself a suit if you want, a handbag, you can buy a pair of shoes.
But why do you want to do that at 10 o'clock at night?
Because it's a nighttime culture.
Well, it might be a nighttime culture, mate. It's not Northern Europe culture.
I mean, the problem for people in this country is nobody could do that in this country because the tradition in this country, if you're walking around a high street at 10 o'clock at night, is to be bladdered and looking for a kebab.
Oh, and you object to that, do you?
Well, I don't think it's very cultural, no.
You spent most of your life doing that.
Absolute rubbish.
You have spent most of your life doing that. How dare you decry...
At 10 o'clock at night, I'm usually either sleeping before I come into work, or I'm having something to eat, or I may be out for dinner. I'm certainly not walking around bladdered because I've got to come to work.
How dare you decry lifestyle you follow most of your life? Yeah, I'm not talking in this job, I'm talking in previous jobs,
That's
when you used to work a normal working day.
That's not true.
Do you know, you won't believe this, but when I first went to Spain with my parents when I was about probably 10 or 11, something like that,
right.
I distinctly remember seeing people sitting, leaning against a wall with a massive sombrero over their head to protect them from the sun, asleep.
Well, they were probably English.
No, they weren't.
Yeah, they were.
No.
People in Spain don't wear sombreros. The only people that wear sombreros in Spain are the tourists who go there and think, that's a good idea, I'll buy a sombrero.
No, they were. And do you know what it reminded me of?
Spanish people don't wear sombreros.
No, they do. This lot did. No, this lot did. They did.
They were probably on a trip from Northampton or something.
No, they weren't. And it reminded me of, do you know what it reminded me of?
Well, I don't know, some spaghetti western?
Exactly. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly had just come out. And I thought, wow, this really is the sort of lifestyle that these guys lead. And they must have been in their forefathers or whatever, their ancestors must have been cowboys and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it was an eye-opener.
Is there any reason for this particular anecdote, or you just kind of remember to pluck it out of your dark, distant past?
No, we were talking about different lifestyles in different European countries, weren't we? I think it first emanated with the fact that Switzerland is a very secretive country.
Yeah.
We've already established that. That's why FIFA is based there. Other countries are very much more laid back.
Yeah, they are.
You wouldn't see people in Switzerland going to bed at 2 o'clock for a lie down till 4 or 5 o'clock.
Swiss are very boring people, actually. If you go to Switzerland, there's nothing going on there. Absolutely nothing.
See, I can't agree with you. I went to another tournament I covered as the sole and exclusive correspondent for TalkSport were the European Championships in 2008 when England didn't get there.
That was the one that England didn't go to. Well, you must have been used an awful lot for that one then.
Say again?
You must have been used an awful lot for that one.
Well, it was because the world's greatest footballers were playing there and I had to cover it, you see. And we went to Zurich and we went to Basel and...
Basel.
Yeah, Basel. We saw at Basel. Where else did we go? What's the other country? What's the other town in Switzerland? Sorry, was it in Switzerland? Where's Zurich? That's Switzerland, isn't
Lugano.
it?
You could have said.
Sorry, no, Lugano.
Bern.
I went to Interlaken.
Because
Interlaken's a big railway network.
Did you go under the Mont Blanc tunnel?
No.
That's one of the great things to do.
No.
Drive under the Mont Blanc tunnel.
No, I wouldn't want to do that in case it fell in on me.
Well, it wouldn't fall in on you.
Well, they have
very unlucky.
No, there have been...
there have been incidents in
exactly,
tunnels,
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
But, I mean, I've been to Switzerland, and I just found it very, very boring and very tedious. The Swiss people don't know how to enjoy themselves.
Have you ever been to the Swiss hills in summer when there's no snow there? Absolutely fantastic.
What?
The Swiss hills when there's no snow there.
What do you mean when there's no snow?
Well,
you're talking about the mountains.
Yeah, mountains.
Well, Mont Blanc's always got snow on it.
Well, yeah, but the lower mountains.
The lower mountains.
The hills. They're called hills. You know, the hills are alive.
Got a name?
You know, when you saw Julie Andrews running out, the hills
that wasn't Switzerland, was it?
Well, no, but it was depicted as Switzerland.
Was it not meant to be on the border between Germany and Italy?
No, it's Switzerland.
Are you sure?
I'm certain. I know all about these things. Because they were frightened that the Germans were going to invade Switzerland.
I thought it was Austria.
No, that was the whole point of the film.
I thought it was Austria.
No, it wasn't Austria.
Right.
Now, what I was going to say
By the way, do you know that we've reshot the idea with your agreements? I don't want anybody to start accusing me of gerrymandering.
Right.
We've reshot the quiz for tomorrow. It's going to be on Portsmouth.
Portsmouth, that's fine.
So it's not going to be on the British Navy.
No, that's fine.
Because obviously,
and by the way,
a show in Portsmouth.
Our very enthusiastic and highly attractive correspondent Liz tells me...
Highly attractive?
Yes.
Have you seen her?
Well, I've seen a picture of her, so
Hey?
if it's the same person, you know, as in the picture.
No, I meant have you met her in person?
No, of course not.
Okay.
No. But what I was saying is, she informs me that the vote for the winners and losers is still open, and...
What's it got to do with her?
Well, because she's keeping in touch with it, and I'm now in the lead.
No, of course it's not still open. It closed at midnight on Tuesday night.
It's still open, and I'm in the lead by 30
votes. You
can
go down the ballot box and vote for the Labour Party if you want, but the election's over.
I'm telling you, I'm only telling you what
That's not how it works.
Told.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll tell you what. Should we do this next week then? Because I keep every week you keep complaining, and every week I accede to your demands, and I say, okay, well then next week we'll let you have retweet instead of favourite. Next week we'll let you keep the vote open. If you'd like me to keep it open for a week, we can do that if you want.
Yeah.
We want me to keep next Monday night. We can keep winners and losers. People can vote for it all the way through the week, and then we'll have the result on the following Monday.
Well, we might...
because somebody who tweets you thinks it's a good idea.
Well, we might think about that. Okay,
I've seen the time, by the way.
Well, listen, I'm aware of the time. It's news time now, and I'll tell you, we'll go back and talk a little bit more about FIFA next, because developments coming in by the minute.
Oh,
when you look
okay.
at some of these newspaper headlines, we should reveal these to our listeners.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. Mike Parry is here, of course. It's a special edition of The Two Mikes. There will be a podcast coming out a little bit later on this morning, around about 6 hours from now, and it will be slightly longer than normal because Mr. Parry, I'm delighted to say, was here from the start at 1 o'clock. Now, a couple of people have wanted to correct you on the sound of music. Okay. James has tweeted at IROMG. Mike Graham, correct again. It was Austria, the sound of music. And here's a text that comes in from somebody who doesn't give his name. Hi, guys. Shoes, maybe that's his name. Get your facts right, mate. It was Austria, not Switzerland, in the sound of music. I know, as I have over 1,000 movies.
Oh, really?
That's what he says.
Yeah, but although it was filmed in one country, it was set in another, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So they didn't,
but it was the border that they were running from was Austria into Switzerland, because the whole point of going to Switzerland was it was a neutral country.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. But nevertheless, when she ran out into the hills and gave it, the hills are alive, she was in Switzerland, because that was the start of the film.
Well, the Alps are, across many countries.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
There are Alps in Italy.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
There are Alps in Italy.
That
there
is
are Alps
exactly
in Austria.
what I'm saying.
There are Alps in Switzerland. There are even French Alps as well.
Yeah, by the way, looking at some of these images of the raids this morning, just getting back to FIFA for a moment.
Yeah.
I mean, why... If I was ever indicted for a crime, i.e., if I was in a...
Well, you mean all these crimes that you've confessed to, for example?
No, I haven't confessed to any crimes.
You've confessed to more crimes in the last 6 months, I think, than I've ever heard of anyone confessing to.
No.
Well, should we run through them?
Petty incursions into everyday life, that's all. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Now, what I'm saying is, if I was in one of the most luxurious hotels in the world... and all of a sudden somebody came into my room, because that's what the FBI agents did.
I know somebody who used to stay in that hotel, actually, quite regularly.
Really? Yeah. And what's
very
it called,
nice,
by the way?
apparently. It's the Dulac or something, Hotel Dulac.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, something like that. And what I'm saying is, the guy said, look, I'm sorry, but we think you need investigation.
Yeah.
The last thing I would do is ask somebody to go and get a sheet and then hold the sheet over the doorway to the exit to the hotel to get me into a car, as if I was a petty criminal trying to avoid identification. I would hold my head up high. I would walk, square-shouldered and say, right, I face the world.
Yeah, but if they've got their hand on the top of your arm, which is the way sometimes they do these things, so you don't scarper. Yeah. Everyone's left in no doubt that you are actually being led into a police car. I mean, the thing about the cars as well is that they're not marked as police cars. So I suppose you could pretend you were just being led away for any number of other reasons.
Well, yeah, but I mean, then although corruption and the allegation of corruption, a terrible thing to have levied upon you, there are worse crimes. And so I would want people to know that it was something that was, really not vicious, brutal or anything like that, if you see what I mean.
No, true, like a white-collar crime.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, never mind all that. Let's talk about something that we touched upon last night that we never really got to discuss in greater detail. And that was this dreadful situation on the Danish radio station where this guy, because he was trying to make a point about animal rights people, decided he was going to beat to death a rabbit
inside his studio,
live on air.
Yeah, live on air
with a bicycle pump.
Yeah, he was a Danish. Yeah, I know. It's very, very hard to understand what the point of this ridiculous exercise was, wasn't it?
Well, not really. I mean, what he was basically saying is that why are people quite happy to eat lambs and young cows as veal, whereas for some reason, because rabbits are considered to be these little fuzzy kind of pet type creatures, you should be all up in arms when somebody feeds you rabbit.
What was the point of this exercise?
Well, he was trying to prove that people have dual sort of purposes for complaining about some meat-eating practices and about how people are hypocritical hypocritical, really, about, for example, some vegetarians who will think it's okay to wear a leather jacket, or some vegetarians who will think it's all right to wear leather shoes. That kind of thing. He was basically trying to point out that, everyone's going to be horrified by what I'm about to do. But surely he could have done it in a slightly less grotesque way.
Yeah, he could have done it in a humane way. He says here, apparently, many people in Denmark are frustrated about us killing the rabbit, but at the same time, they're having meat for dinner.
Yeah.
They're not taking into account that you're supposed to kill an animal before you eat meat. Let me ask you a question. Why would it be wrong to kill an animal and then eat it?
Yeah.
And he goes on to say...
Imagine if he did that here.
Yeah.
Imagine what Ofcom would say.
He said the rabbit was killed in a sound manner, but he then took it home, cooked it, and see, do your children think you treat rabbits like that?
What?
Do your children think you treat rabbits like that?
No, in fact, you know what? I've got like an entire family of rabbits now living in the garden.
I think that's lovely.
It's great. There's about a dozen of them, sometimes as many as 15.
Wild rabbits?
And at dusk, they just all sit around as if they're having a little meeting.
That's brilliant.
Dog likes to chase them, he never catches them.
No, but don't your children go out and have a look at them?
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Yeah, don't they like them?
Yeah, they do.
Well, then keep the dog restrained so the dog doesn't chase them away. And then
they keep coming back.
And then your children could bond with the rabbits.
That is the way of things.
What?
Well, that is the way of things.
Yeah.
You see, rabbits live in the countryside, right?
Yes.
The biggest danger to a rabbit is a fox.
Yes, I suppose you're right.
And every single night of their existence, they have to worry about being eaten by a fox.
Yeah, I suppose they do.
So the dog is the least of their problems.
Yeah, but that's why they go into rabbit hutches.
And only one of my
rabbit
children
holes.
has ever eaten rabbit.
Oh, okay.
Because one of the younger one doesn't want to eat rabbit because he doesn't think that's nice.
You know our very good pal, Andy Townsend?
Just went straight over your head.
No, it didn't go over my head.
Well,
no.
you were asking me about my kids' attitudes to rabbits.
Yeah, and you said only one of them's ever eaten rabbit.
Yeah, but
so
don't you want to explore that?
Why?
Well, don't you want to ask me why the younger one doesn't want to eat rabbit when the older one does?
Well, I don't eat rabbit. I
why
wouldn't
not?
eat rabbit. Well, it is a
bunny
bunny
then you're
rabbit.
A hypocrite,
it is a
you?
bunny rabbit.
But you'll eat lamb, though.
Yeah, of course I'll eat lamb.
Well, have you ever seen a lamb in a field?
Yeah, of course I have.
Don't they look sweet and cuddly
sheep.
and rather nice?
Yeah, but they're not as little as rabbits.
Well, that's going to get slaughtered for you to eat.
Poor little rabbits, I don't like it.
Well, what about the lamb, though? Poor little lamb.
So why isn't your younger child eating rabbit?
Because for the same reason that you don't. He
Right.
thinks they're nice and cuddly, but he's only 8.
Poor little things.
You can't accuse him of being a hypocrite.
What I was going to say about
Well, he does eat sausages.
Yeah, well, everybody eats sausages. What I was going to say about our good friend, Mr. Andy Townsend, is he's got an estate in the Midlands.
Has he?
In the Golden Triangle, round...
I thought that was down in Bangkok, the Golden Triangle.
No, there is one in the Midlands, around Lapwick.
Really? I only know the one in Southeast Asia.
No, I tell you, lives
where
there.
the heroin comes from.
Lady...
Why do they call it the Golden Triangle?
Well, because it's a choice part of the West Midlands.
Yeah, but the Golden Triangle, famously, is where all the heroin comes from.
Well, this is the Golden Triangle of the West Midlands. And Lady Baroness Brady lives there.
Oh, yeah.
Steve Bruce, and most famously,
didn't you
probably,
say Jasper Carrot lived
Jasper
there?
Carrot.
Well? You told us that story before, yeah.
Yeah, about walking around with the orange balaclava.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't be noticed by anybody.
Yeah, strange thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, what I was saying is, at dusk, when these rabbits come out, Andy can often be seen sitting on the edge of his patio, waiting for the rabbits to come out, with a shotgun in his hands.
Are you sure you should be telling this story?
And blows them away.
Are you sure you should be telling this story?
Well, what's not to tell?
Because now there's going to be a load of animal rights activists turning up at Andy Townsend's house to try and stop him doing it. I don't think he's going to thank you for that.
Well,
it's just like indiscretion on your part.
Well, they don't know where he lives, so it doesn't matter.
Well, you've just told him he lives in the Golden Triangle in Birmingham.
Yeah, it's a big triangle.
Well, an isosceles triangle?
Well, no, it's an equidistant triangle, actually.
Is it?
But, no, what I was going to say is that...
Equilateral, you mean?
He doesn't do it for fun. He doesn't do it because he's
trying to kill him, presumably.
He's a brutalist or anything like that.
Brutalist?
No, but the problem is, Andy is a son of toil now in terms of his garden, which is a huge garden.
He was doing the Europa League commentary last night with Sam Massafate.
Yeah, that's right, he was, yeah. And in this huge garden of his, a section of it has been cordoned off where he's cultivating all sorts of things like radishes.
Okay. So does he not want the rabbits to eat them? Is that the thing?
In particular, lettuces. Now, he's very proud of his lettuces. He's got prize-winning lettuces. The rabbits come out and eat all the lettuces. So he has to blow them away.
Is the plural lettuces?
Yes, lettuce-I.
Is it lettuces? No, I don't know what it is. I just wondered. It sounds wrong, lettuces.
No, it is lettuces.
Isn't it just lettuce?
No, it's lettuces.
Have you got a collection of lettuce?
No. How many lettuces have you got in your garden?
Yeah, I haven't got any. I've got a lot of rabbits, though.
Well, he had about 20 or 30. But anyway, you should keep the rabbits, because sometimes I go...
Well, hang on. But don't you then attack him for doing this? Presumably you don't.
Well, it's his land, and it's his decision, and it's his...
Well, you just told me I should keep my dog under lock and key to not chase the rabbits. You've got a friend who shoots them.
Yeah, but you
don't say anything to him.
You just said the dog doesn't catch the rabbits.
He doesn't catch them, no.
Exactly.
He probably scares them, though.
I mean, you know the cartoon strip, Fred Bassett?
I do.
Which is on the back
In fact, that was
Daily Mail.
You know, the guy who used to do that was called Graham.
Graham, that's right.
And I met him once as a sort of relatively young man. I was about 12 or 13.
Well, when your father worked in the graphic department.
Well, no, my dad didn't know him particularly, but he used to do the cartoon, I think, in the Evening News at the time.
Oh, I see.
And we went to some do, which I think was like a Press Golf Society dinner or something like that.
Yeah.
And we went over to him to say hello because we shared the same name.
Right.
And asked him if he would draw. I think my dad asked him if he would draw a little thing on the card, on the menu card for me.
Right.
And he refused.
No, you're
he
joking.
Wouldn't do it.
Really?
He wouldn't do it.
That's
my
a bit
dad
mean.
nearly lamped him.
That's a bit mean.
He was like, no, sorry, I never do that.
Yeah.
Because all we wanted was like a little drawing of a dog and say, hi, Mike, blah, whatever. Yeah. And he refused to do it.
Well, isn't that mean? Because the point I was going to say was Fred Bassett is always chasing rabbits, but fortunately never catches them. Because that would rather ruin his cuddly image, wouldn't it?
It would rather, yeah. You wouldn't want Fred Bassett with his fangs dripping with blood.
Do you know what? We used to have a cartoonist, or he was a graphic artist at the Express called Tim somebody, right?
Yeah, I remember Tim, yeah. He was the art director.
And
I can't remember his last name.
When my,
I'm going to tell another story about him.
Yeah, when my brother-in-law was 40, we took a picture in, because I was going out with the secretary at the Express at the time. He was no, seriously. She was a big friend of Tim's.
Right.
And we took a picture of my brother, and he did, honestly, a fantastic caricature cartoon of him for his 40th birthday.
Tremendous.
Unfortunately, Tim Clapston died of a sort of long heart attack at the Express. Terry Manners, we talked about the other day, took him in the back of a car to the hospital, but Terry failed because by the time they got there, Tim was dead.
Right.
Couldn't keep him alive in the car.
It's a terrible story.
It is a shocking story.
Thank you for telling us, though. This is Talk Sport. We are the two Mikes. More coming up.
On digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. Talk Sport.
It's a Talk Sport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. Mike Parry's here, of course. We're going to talk some more about the FIFA story coming up very shortly. We're going to talk to a guy down in Australia and find out what their reaction to it all is. Did you see that Joey Barton's been released from QPR this week? Last night, I should say.
I think it came as a bit of a shock to him because I think just a couple of days ago he'd said, after it was confirmed that QPR that was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? QPR going down, he said quite magnanimously, some thought, well, I'm prepared to stay at QPR and stick around because there's still a sort of, a supposition that Joey Barton is a Premier League player.
Yeah.
But
I can't see him necessarily playing in the Premier League next season, can you?
Well, funny enough, Everton had an interest in him about 2.5-3 years ago when he was...
Is he an Everton fan or is he a Liverpool fan?
No, he's an Everton fan.
Is he? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's an Everton fan. And he made one substitute appearance for England, so he can call himself an England international.
Yeah.
But from that point of view, what I always think about teams that go down is that when the players say, well, we're going to stick around, get us back up, it's a bit of a futile gesture to make because you're responsible for them going down in the first place. So, they need better players to get back up.
He posted on Twitter a little note which we couldn't quite read all of because it wasn't all visible, but he said he wanted to put on record his sincere thanks to the chairman and board. And then he said that he wanted to also thank the players with whom he had played during his time. He said, I've played under and my teammates that I played with during my time at the club. It was only a few weeks ago. He was saying that most of them were, practically not fit for purpose, wasn't he?
Well,
he didn't name them, but he said about half a dozen of them.
Didn't he say about, what did he call them? Bad eggs, yeah.
No,
bad eggs,
yeah.
Or bad apples in the barrel or something like that. Yeah, a few bad eggs in the dressing room. But I think that normally means, that's not about whether any good playing or not. It's their attitude in the dressing room about whether or not their heart is in it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
He's still thanking them now.
Yeah.
No, a strange thing to do.
No, well, the thing is, he's a transformed man, isn't he? From being angry young man, he's kind of become philosopher, and I suppose he's got to be
he kind of goes backwards
about
and forwards on that, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah, he does definitely.
If you were the Everton captain or the Everton, manager, would you want him at Everton?
No, definitely not. No, and I don't mean that rudely, and I don't say that. But he's just not good enough to be an Everton player anymore. I'm afraid. He's older now. His legs don't work as well as they used to, and he
was never a massive star player, was he? I mean, he's said some very interesting things about. He said something about Neymar the other day.
Yeah.
Basically sort of comparing himself to Neymar, which is kind of self-deluded, isn't it?
I mean, he only lasted as long at Manchester City as Manchester City were an average team. Once Manchester City got ambitions to become a very good team, he didn't fit in there.
Yeah.
And he didn't make a big difference at Newcastle, did he?
No.
And
he certainly made a big difference at QPR because that was the year that Manchester City won the league when he got sent off.
Well, exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But that was in the middle of his...
that's what I remember him for.
That was after he'd rebranded himself as a philosopher, hadn't he? But he kind of, on the day...
attacked everybody.
Yeah, if he got the philosophy and started resorting to sort of physical
But he's done that
again.
for QPR as well.
Yeah,
That's the problem. Anyway, well, that's enough about him. Let's talk about the lights going out all over Britain, because you were telling me earlier that...
See, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Concerned about lights going out.
I don't get it. I thought the nutters who'd condemned us to massive power, electricity and gas charges over the years had been swept out of power now, because Ed Miliband, and this is not a fanciful assertion, this is fact, Ed Miliband, when he was Energy Secretary, introduced legislation in this country meaning that we had to cut down on carbon emissions at a rate 80%
This is when
faster.
he was Environment Secretary under Gordon Brown. Right?
Absolutely, 80% faster than the rest of Europe. And a ruinous policy in terms of what it costs each household
and
in this
was
country.
this when some of the local authorities started actually switching the lights off in some parts of Britain and saying at night we don't need street lights?
They had to. But anyway, listen, I thought that, the new Prime Minister, Mr Cameron, well, I mean, the existing Prime Minister...
Newly elected,
thank you, and newly established with a majority, would be able to get rid of some of these more nutty policies. But listen to this. Here we go. David Cameron made a catastrophic misjudgment last week by putting our energy policy in the charge of a minister who believes that only by decarbonising our economy can we avert the awful disaster of global warming. Our new Energy and Climate Change Secretary, Amber Rudd, it's a funny name, isn't it?
She's MP for Hastings,
is wholly committed to both these beliefs, saying that her highest priority will be the signing of that proposed global climate treaty in Paris next December. One of the events was the announcement that yet another of our large coal-fired power stations, Ferrybridge in Yorkshire, is shortly to close, thanks to the way George Osborne's carbon tax, 5 times higher than any other in Europe, is making coal, otherwise by far the cheapest source of electricity, wholly uncompetitive. It follows...
So what does it mean?
Well, what it means is if we're closing down coal-fired power stations, what's going to replace it? The answer is we haven't got anything to replace it.
Because they don't fancy nuclear, do they, anymore?
Yeah, they do fancy nuclear, but it's going to take 15 years to build nuclear power stations.
I don't get. And also, the people that build nuclear power stations have to be imported, don't they? They have to get the French companies to build them.
They do.
Which seems very weird.
Listen to this. Last winter, we could still rely on coal for a third of all the electricity we need in this country to keep our lights on. It averages 12.7 gigawatts, right? It's far more energy than from any other power source. We're now losing our coal-fired power stations so fast, 7 will soon have closed since 2013, and only 8 remain in this country, that in just 3 years' time our total capacity will have fallen from 24 gigawatts to 15 gigawatts, with more closures to come.
It's all sort of gobbledygook to me, though.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is nobody knows where the extra electricity is going to come from.
So are you saying that we are going to be in a sort of state of darkness?
Well, I'm not. I've been looking at what experts are predicting. Experts are saying inevitably we're going to have to switch the lights out in this country.
This is another one of your kind of could be possibly, nothing's actually going to be that dramatic.
Well, except that there's an estimation here saying that because we signed up to renewable energy sources developed by nations such as Britain, we've got to keep a promise by 2020 to pay $100 billion to help our country achieve these targets.
$100 billion?
Yeah.
So how are we going to get taxed more then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, somebody's going to have to pay it. Yeah. I mean, it's all complete madness to me.
It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Did you see the old Queen's speech yesterday, by the way?
Well, I saw a bit of the ceremony, but I didn't listen to the speech because I knew what it was all about. It was reported in yesterday morning's papers. It was leaked well ahead of the... do you like the actual ceremony itself and all the paraphernalia that goes with it?
I think I'm quite happy that they do it.
I
don't sit there and watch it studiously year after year.
No, I don't.
But I quite like the pomp and ceremony.
Yeah, I can't stand these people who say... it's usually Dennis Skinner sitting on the front row. Get rid of that funny fellow with the tights on and that stick that he bangs on the door.
You see that he didn't do any heckling this year, and he said the reason he didn't do any heckling is he's been exhausted by trying to make sure that the SNP don't nick all the seats, which seems to be like a daily thing now.
It does.
They keep scuttling into the chamber to try and take over his seat, and he keeps trying to get there first.
No, it's true. It's like the Germans and the towels, isn't it? It's like being on holiday around the swimming pool. It literally is, and they get in there. But I love that pomp and ceremony because it's part of what we're... And I hate people who want to get rid of British heritage. I hate it when we...
Well, it's like the trooping of the colour and all that stuff.
Of course it is. I mean, I hated it when a government got rid of the Lord Chancellor sitting on the woolsack in the House of Lords and replaced him with the Minister of Justice.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want that. I want the old ways. I mean, soon they'll say, oh, well, we're going to do away with marriage ceremonies now because, that's a bit old-fashioned.
Well, why would that bother you? You've never been married.
No, I know, but I do like to see people
Mind you,
getting
I suppose
married.
if nobody else got married, you wouldn't have any sex victims to plunder through, would you?
I'm going to ignore that fatuous statement. But, if I pass a church and I see a couple get married, I stop and I get out.
It's nice to hear the bells as well.
Hear the bells, see all the confetti.
You get out, do you?
I get out, get out the car.
Check out the bride.
No, don't be ridiculous. I go to share their joy.
Really?
And, yeah.
You must love that.
Yeah,
so you just got to sit in the back of the church and watch?
No. It's when they've come outside and, it's nice to see the smiling bride.
Well, what do you do? Just stand
happy
there?
Groom. Yeah, I have a look and there's a bit of confetti flying around, which I like. No, it's not.
That is weird.
And I see all the happy people and then I
do
see...
you talk to them?
No, of course not.
You just stand there.
And then the old Rolls Royce pulls up. It's usually a vintage Rolls Royce, an old silver ghost. And they jump in and they're waving at everybody and all that. And I think that's quite a great ceremony.
Right.
I've never been through it myself for obvious reasons. But
you must have been to a few weddings, though, in your time, apart from mine.
Do you know I've never been asked to be best man?
Really?
For any of my mates.
Why does that not surprise you?
Well, no, it does surprise me because I've been the most, loyal and devoted and honourable friend, and I keep getting turned over by all my mates who always pick somebody else to be the best man.
Well, they're probably frightened you'll make some horrendous speech outing all sorts of information that you were supposed to keep secret.
No, it's a sense of malice and envy against my successful life.
Well, I'll tell you what, just to help you,
compared to the life of drudgery they might have to endure.
Well, would you like me to promise you if I ever get married again, you could be the best man?
Well, I'm not sure I'd be able to fulfil that commitment.
Why not?
Well, I mean, it depends who you marry. I might not like the person you
marry.
marry.
It depends who I marry.
Well, it's got to be somebody that I get on with and that kind of stuff.
Well, this is why you don't get asked, because you give a series of conditions.
No.
This is typical of you.
No, it's not a series of conditions.
Why do you sit so far away from the microphone?
Well, I'm not. It's just that I'm contemplating the rest of the show because I've only got half an hour to go with you, and we've got a recap on the FIFA situation and sign off with a very powerful statement about where we stand on this FIFA situation, what we think has happened, and where it's going to go next.
Well, we're going to talk to Simon Hill from Australia coming up next. We are the Two Mikes. There will be a podcast coming out in about 6 hours' time, or maybe even less. It'll be slightly longer, of course, because of our special extra hour on the FIFA crisis, which undoubtedly is going to be a dominating story for weeks and weeks to come.
Blimey.
US attorneys are all over this organisation like a rash, you have to say. They're treating them like some kind of mafia organisation.
Yes.
They're talking about racketeering, talking about charges of money laundering, talking about wire fraud, all kinds of stuff. Now, one of the countries, Mike, who have a great interest in what happens here because of what the Qatar and the Russian awards of the World Cups are all about is Australia. We're going to talk now to Simon Hill, who works for Fox Sports down in Australia. He's been very vocal in the past about how ludicrous it was that Australia got passed over for hosting the World Cup. And we're going to get him on now. Simon, very good morning to you.
Hi guys, how are you?
Yeah,
very well, thank you.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us again, Simon. You and I spoke about the Australian kind of attitude really to what's been going on with the Qatar World Cup, and now Russian World Cup is perhaps in question. What's been the reaction down there, first of all from yourself, but also from the country about this incredible development, this incredible scandal?
Well, my personal response can be summed up in 3 words. God bless America for having the kahunas to actually take on some of these guys. In terms of Australia's response, well, unfortunately yesterday it got buried a little bit, this story, because we had the State of Origin Rugby League, which is massive over here. But, we're playing catch-up today. I think the reaction is both one of astonishment and quiet euphoria, because in common with most of the rest of the world, or certainly the English-speaking world, we feel it's time for a change over here, and that FIFA's corrupt practices, and I think we're safe to use that word, given what's happened over the last 24 hours, has cast a stain over the sport of football, which is going to be hard to shift for the next 10 years, and particularly in this part of the world, where, as I've told you before, we're trying to grow football as a sport. It's not the number one game. It doesn't help. So, this will hopefully be the start of the process that brings the whole sorry, smelly house of cards tumbling down, and with it Mr. Blatter, we hope.
Yeah, Simon, very nice to make your acquaintance, my friend. And one of the questions being asked of Greg Dyke, who's the chairman of our football association over here, all day today is, if the World Cups have to be reassigned, is England ready for one? And what we say over here is, yes, we are, because we've got some of the finest collection of grounds in Europe. Is Australia ready to do it if it suddenly happened? But can I just put a caveat on that question. I don't think it will. I just don't think it'll go as far as them being reassigned. But if it was, is Australia ready?
Well, look, first of all, I'd agree with your assessment because if Qatar and Russia, for example, were to be stripped of the World Cups, you would be dealing with litigation that would cost not just millions, but billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So, who pays for that? I'm not sure. Secondly, is Australia ready? Sure. Australia could host it tomorrow. We just hosted an Asian Cup in January. All right, it's a smaller tournament. It's the equivalent of the European Championships over in your part of the world, and it was a resounding success. Crowds averaging over 21,000 for such footballing luminaries as Uzbekistan and North Korea. So the crowds would turn up, the infrastructure is there, Australia could do it no problem. But whether there's the appetite in Australia after what happened, and don't forget, the government here tipped in $46 million of taxpayers' money, and that's been rightly perceived as being thrown down the drain or put into the pockets of corrupt FIFA officials like Jack Warner.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
And the problem, I suppose, now, Simon, is because it was more or less forgotten about and the people of Australia had said, OK, well, we've learned our lesson and perhaps, we won't supply that kind of money to make another bid. Presumably now with these legal proceedings from America, somebody in the Australian bid team might say, well, now's the time for us to actually try and recoup some of that money, or at the very least try and look at taking part in some kind of restructuring of FIFA itself.
Well, this has been done already. 2 years ago, Frank Lowy, who is the head of the FFA, the chairman, actually publicly requested a refund of the $46 million that was tipped in by the Australian government, to which, of course, he received short shrift from Sepp Blatter and FIFA and said that's not going to happen. I think, if you look at it from FIFA's point of view, if you were to say to Australia, just as an isolated example, OK, here's your $46 million back, then you would get America, you'd get Japan, you'd get Korea, you'd get all the other losing bids going, well, hang on a minute, what about us? So you're therefore, you're going down the road of no return, really. So I'm not sure whether that is feasible. Just as to whether Australia will be able to host it in future, I've said yes, they can. There was only last month a tentative proposal put forward by New Zealand, our close neighbours here, to host a World Cup in, I think, 2030 or 34. And they were looking at a joint bid with Australia. And I can tell you that when that was made public, the response from Australia said it all. There wasn't one. They weren't interested.
No. You see, I'm just a bit worried from what you've told us there and, the resentment about the taxpayers' money going into the bid, whether this whole affair, starting with the award of the World Cups to Russia and Qatar, has actually put the game back in Australia when we thought, it was accelerating. Last time I was there, the only face I could see on posters all over Australia was Tim Cahill, who plays for my club, Everton, here in England. But, there seemed to be a huge enthusiasm for it then. Has that gone backwards now?
No, look, there's huge enthusiasm for football here. It's grown massively in the last 10 years with the advent of the new professional competition, the A-League, and obviously the success of the Socceroos with the likes of Tim Cahill, Mark Schwarzer, Harry Kewell, Mark Viduka. That's all helped to grow the game, but it's still very fragile. And, of course, we exist in a country here that has only 23 million inhabitants, and we have 3 other codes of football which are very popular: rugby league, rugby union, Aussie rules, and we have cricket, which is a national institution. So in terms of the corporate dollar, we're constantly battling to keep our heads above water and to try and grow the game. So look, things like this won't destroy football. There's no doubt about that. It's on pretty solid footing now in Australia, but it doesn't help us to grow it because people who are perhaps interested by football but not necessarily passionate will look at this sort of corrupt behaviour and say, you know what, that's not for me.
Yeah. And what about the Australian attitude to this meeting on Friday? Because obviously we've got a whole load of delegates from all around the world converging on Switzerland. Europe's only got 50-odd now. Oceania's got, I think, about 14. I mean, is there much being said there about whether they're going to vote to, say, cancel this particular vote for Sepp Blatter's presidential sort of renomination, or what is going to happen? Because, I mean, Greg Dyke from our FA has gone over to Zurich, saying that he's obviously in the camp of Prince Ali, and he might be sort of persuaded, really, rather than boycotting the vote itself, actually trying to get Blatter out that way.
Well, Greg Dyke's fortunate in one way in that his confederation, UEFA, is belongs to the refusing it camp, and by and large, they want Prince Ali in, and they want reform in FIFA. Now, unfortunately, here in Australia, we're a member of the Asian Football Confederation, which has en masse been instructed to vote for Sepp Blatter under the leadership of Sheikh Salman, the member of the Bahraini royal family that is the AFC president. His power base is a guy called Sheikh Ahmed from Kuwait, who I think you'll probably find on Friday will be elected to the FIFA Executive Committee. So if Australia decides to vote for Prince Ali, and I think instinctively they would like to because they would like to see reform, that puts them into direct conflict with the regional body, the AFC. Now, there is a further problem in that Sheikh Ahmed, who I've already described as being the power base behind the AFC president, is no fan of Australia being a member of the AFC in the first place. You might remember we were only admitted in 2006, and many in the Middle East don't like Australia being in the AFC because, of course, we tend to take one of their World Cup qualifying spots. So there is a bigger political game at play here, and Frank Lowy has been very cagey in saying who he's going to vote for. If he's wise, he'll tell nobody.
This is the problem, of course. Simon, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks
Simon Hill
so much, Simon,
from Fox Sports. That's the big problem, you see. My fear about all of this is if this vote goes ahead and everything kind of reverts to normal and all the Blatter supporters vote for Blatter, he'll just get re-elected, won't he? And until such time, or unless there comes a time when he's, convinced that he should step down because of, further investigations and further revelations, then he's going to be stuck there for another 5 years.
Won't we find out now in the next 36 hours whether or not Sepp Blatter does have any level of shame at all?
I don't think he does have any.
You don't think so?
I really don't. I think, what Simon was just describing there, say, for example, FIFA are right, and they have this meeting, and they say, look, these two events are completely unrelated. We've convinced ourselves, and we're trying to convince you that we've got nothing to do with these corrupt individuals who, and we're happy to say, have now been suspended from FIFA, right? We're happy that this is all being cleaned up. We are getting on with the business of the future of FIFA. Sepp Blatter is running for president once more for the 5th term against Prince Ali, and we're going to have an election as normal. Blatter will win that election.
Yeah.
I think the only hope is that people will get together and say, look, we don't think this election should take place and boycott it.
I mean, the question is, can Blatter be deposed by anybody except FIFA members?
I don't think he can.
If he can't, then he will get elected back in.
The only thing that will stop that happening...
Is there no level of shame? I mean, although let's stress, and we keep stressing, at the moment, Sepp Blatter is not personally implicated in having done anything wrong.
But that's what I'm saying. In the parallel universe of the FIFA world... Nothing's changed.
Yeah, but, a captain has to go down with his ship, right? And the ship is holed mightily below the water level.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
And so if there's any honour left in this organisation, he has to go down with it.
Yeah, well, we shall see. We'll talk some more about this coming up next on TalkSport.
On DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM.
The pressure's on now.
Relieve the itch. TalkSport.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He's Mike Parry. There will, of course, be a podcast coming out in about 5.5 hours or so. It'll be slightly longer than normal because of this extraordinary story we'll be covering tonight about the crisis at FIFA. And we haven't got an awful lot more time to discuss the ramifications of it, Mike. But one thing we haven't done yet either is talk about some of the allegations more specifically. We've talked a little bit about this $40,000 handoff for the 2011 FIFA presidential election. But there's a couple of allegations surrounding South Africa 2010, which you were at.
Well, that's very interesting because actually, if you remember it, we remember it very well because we had a phone conversation when I was in South Africa, which initiated us first working together. So, happy times and all that kind of stuff. And I have to say, Michael, since I've rejoined you on the
it's not been too bad, has it?
It's not been bad at all, my boy. But anyway, look, what I'm saying is, once again, working in South Africa during the World Cup, you were aware at all minutes of time, a day and night, of just how important FIFA regard themselves within a World Cup. I mean, it is their competition. It is the biggest competition in the world. Much bigger than the Olympics, in my view, because it touches more people around the world.
I agree with that.
And that's the way it is. But, convoys of maybe 12 or 13 cars turning up at games, bringing people not even as important as Mr. Blatter to the games. It might be the General Secretary rather than Mr. Blatter and all this kind of stuff, But just to, although we knew then that there were all sorts of... Africa itself as a continent was a particular focus for those who thought there was corruption with inside FIFA because, of course, it was Mr. Blatter's mantra, I will take football around the world. I will take it to new nations and all that kind of stuff. And everybody as well, without being rude or offensive to the African nation, knew that emerging countries and emerging economies are always more susceptible to the influx of money, which perhaps is dodgy.
Yes.
Because they need it.
Let me give you the exact allegation in the indictment. The indictment alleges that Jack Warner, who was president of the federation that represents Central, North American and Caribbean football, CONCACAF, accepted a $10 million bribe from the South African government and FIFA officials to provide votes for the 2010 World Cup bid.
Yeah, well, I've got a bit more on that here, and it comes from a correspondent we have in Zurich, Ben Rumsey.
Yeah.
And he says South Africa paid $10 million, equivalent of £6.52 million pounds sterling, in bribes to secure the 2010 World Cup, and the cash was transferred via a FIFA account, according to the explosive full indictment against 14 current and former FIFA officials. So you're absolutely right. That's one of the official one of the official indictments.
Right.
The money was paid to disgraced executives Jack Warner and Chuck Blazer. The United States Department of Justice alleges in a 164-page dossier detailing the charge that led to the raft of arrests in Zurich yesterday. Mr. Warner, for whom an arrest warrant was issued in Trinidad last night, was also, and of course he's since given himself in, was also accused of soliciting and accepting bribes over the selection of the host nation for the 1998 World Cup in France. But the indictment focused more on the award of the 2010 tournament, including an allegation that a separate cash payment of $10,000, that's £6,520 sterling, was collected from a hotel room in Paris from a high-ranking South African bid committee official.
Right.
So that guy hasn't been identified yet.
So there are going to be more likely indictments of more individuals over the course of time, aren't they? Because what they'll probably be trying to do is what they did with Chuck Blazer, the US guy, which is basically turn them into people who will give them evidence. I'm just reading, actually, in the Times. Fascinating story. And believe it or not, it's got a mobility scooter in it, which you might appreciate. In the course of allegedly spending $29 million on a FIFA credit card, splurging on luxury homes, private jets and fine dining, Chuck Blazer is said to have grown so obese that he lost the ability to walk. And he was actually approached while he was travelling between two restaurants in Manhattan on a mobility scooter by the FBI, who basically said to him, look, mate, we've got you bang to rights. You can either come with us now in handcuffs or you can agree to meet us downtown later.
Sorry, that wasn't yesterday. That was when he was first lifted a couple of years ago.
This was when he was first lifted a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But he had basically a fleet of mobility scooters everywhere he went because he couldn't walk.
And he'd purloined, allegedly, $29 million.
He had spent $29 million on FIFA credit cards. I mean, that's beggars belief, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But they approached him in the middle of a Manhattan street
utterly beggars
as
belief.
he was between lunch and dinner and basically said, look, you can either help us out or we've got you for avoiding taxes for so many years that you will never see the outside world again.
I know, and you can picture it now because we know how wide the sidewalks are in Manhattan, right? And how high they are off the ground. I hope that they've gone around making plenty of platforms on those Manhattan pavements, because if you fell on one of those in a mobility scooter, you'd never get up. Just getting back to the South Africa thing, Mike, another bit of information we've dug up here. According to the reports coming out of South Africa, Jack Warner, we've spoken about, had competition for his favours to award to recommend awarding the game to South Africa. He got a call from somebody in Morocco offering another $1 million, £652,000 sterling. The rival bid of Morocco, but Blazer learnt from his colleague, this is Chuck Blazer, which has been talking about him, that high-ranking officials of FIFA, the South African government and the South African bid committee were prepared to arrange for a much, much higher payment for the government of South Africa to pay $10 million to support the African diaspora. So
diaspora.
Diaspora, thank you. So what they were saying here was, they were saying, oh, well, actually, it wasn't a bribe. It was a kind of, oh, look, we'll contribute to the well-being of football in Africa as a nation. Just bring the World Cup here.
Yeah, I mean, somebody tweeted the show a little bit earlier on. I haven't got it in front of me now, but I'm sorry if I can't give you your name, but who said this would make a great Martin Scorsese movie, because there's a touch of everything in this.
Of course there is.
Later on in this piece in the Times, it talks about, this is 2012 now, where basically Blazer was now working for the FBI as an undercover informant. And unbeknownst to the people he was meeting in London in a hotel in Mayfair, he was wearing a keyring which was fitted with a tiny microphone.
Yeah, what was he doing with that then?
It was all being recorded by... They were basically bugging all these meetings that he was having with FIFA officials. So they've now got all that stuff, and that's what's led to these indictments and these charges.
I'm sure
so they describe it as US investigators being given an amazing glimpse of football's grubby underbelly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they've got everything, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Everybody's getting in on the act anyway. So our old colleague, my old colleague, not sure if he's your old colleague, David Ginola.
David Ginola,
of course.
no, he's a friend of yours, isn't he? David and I used to share the odd cigarette out on the
I was about to say,
smoking balcony.
He was a working colleague to me, but a smoking colleague to you.
That's right.
Don't you find that disgraceful?
Why?
Because to be classed as somebody's smoking colleague... Out on the fire escape, grubby little men with cigarettes in their hands.
Smoking, but you're calling David Ginola a grubby little man.
Well, he is if he's out on the fire escape.
You wouldn't call him that to his face.
He's out on the fire escape with a cigarette in his hand, and then throwing it on the floor. Do you know what? You could kill me. You could kill me with your smoking.
Well, David Ginola's going to kill you if I tell him what you just said.
Well, I tell you what. You throw all those cigarette butts on the floor on the fire escape. I could be running out of here with flames licking around my posterior.
That's not what happens.
And slip on those cigarette butts and go tumbling down the fire escape.
We only smoke in a designated smoking area, I think you'll find. And David Ginola used to come out and talk to me out there because he wanted to stop being harassed by some of the other numpties that he was getting talked to in the studio area. So, no, I'm not saying you were one of those.
No, I wasn't one of those.
But there were others that he wanted to escape from. And so he would come out and we would have very sensible conversations about all manner of things.
I would appear on the same show as David.
We would talk about food. We would talk about life in general, sometimes talk about women. You know, we had some great conversations. And I think
what sort of conversation would you have with David about women?
I don't think I'm free to reveal it. Unlike you, I don't wish to kind of unveil every single private conversation I've ever had with anybody.
Would it be, for instance, David, what is the average sort of prettiness value of the women that you have been out with during your life?
I would never ask him a question like that. I certainly wouldn't put on a dopey French accent just because I'm talking to somebody French.
He's never been... that's true, I forgot about that.
I don't go, David, would you like to join me for a cigarette?
Yeah, he's the French person, you're the English person, yeah. But... he told me once that he's never been out with anybody... No, he didn't, actually. I asked him, and he confirmed that he's never been out with anybody who's you could rate less than sort of Miss World or a beauty queen.
Well, he's a footballer. Why would that be
he's supposed to be one of the most handsome men in the world. But anyway,
well, he is,
what David said today...
he was a great admirer of my cooking, actually. We used to talk about that because I once tweeted a picture of one of the frittatas that I cooked for breakfast after I'd gone home.
Frittata?
And he favoured it and said, bon appetit, Michael.
Bon appetit, yeah, very nice, yeah. He corrected the title of my book that I wrote for Mr. Brazil.
I thought you and he fell out at some point anyway.
No, we didn't fall out at all. Not at all. And he said, Michael, he said, your book is called, there's an awful lot of bubbly in
Brazil.
He
pointed out that you got it wrong, didn't he?
But you called them on the cover a bon vivant.
Yeah.
It is not bon vivant, Michael. It is bon vivant. Yeah. So we corrected
that. Why
is
he talking a Russian accent?
Wouldn't you have thought that the publishers might have had that checked out by some sort of French guy?
Well, if it was a reputable publishers, yes.
Yeah,
but the people who publish your books probably couldn't put two words together.
I wouldn't say that, mate. Our lawyers are listening.
Really?
Now then, what David said today, and by the way, he was on the streets of London when he said this, so he's not back in France at the moment.
No. Presumably you'll be seeing him then, since he's a great mate of yours. When will you be putting a call in?
I haven't got time.
You haven't got time to see David Ginola.
Remember, we're planning for a show in Portsmouth this weekend,
That's right? Yeah.
All my energy and time is directed towards getting that sorted.
All right, good.
Something you've been incapable of doing.
No, I do what I'm best at, which is I turn up and I perform.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not good at organising things.
Yeah, no, I know that. Anyway, David said... I guess this morning is the start of... I'll do it in David term. I guess this morning is the start of something big.
He's got Russian again.
No.
Nostrovia.
No, we will hopefully.
You can't do a French accent.
How can I do David?
Think of Peter Sellers. Think of the Pink Panther.
Yeah. There's
a berm in the room.
We will hopefully see.
No, he's German.
I'm not getting that right.
Why don't you do it in Sean Dyche's voice? That'd be better.
He says in the next few years, a new era among FIFA. Now, Gary Lineker, highly respected spokesman on football these days, because, of course, he is probably our leading football TV pundit.
Yes.
He says, this is extraordinary. FIFA is imploding. There can't be a more corrupt, deplorable organisation on earth than FIFA. The house of cards is falling. Time for a change, says Gary. And by the way, they've got a picture of him in most of the papers this morning showing a clean-cut and clean-shaven.
Oh, he's got rid of the beard, has he?
Well, no, I thought he had a ridiculous little beard on when I saw him today.
Goatee, yeah.
A little goatee, what's all that about?
Well, he's had that for the whole season.
Is that for a bet
Why
or something?
Why are you rubbing your eye?
I've got something in it. I think a bit of dust.
Well, have you got something in your eye? We've sitting in a studio which is completely hermetically or even hermetically sealed.
Just before we go, let me tell you something about my eyes, which is quite worrying.
Yeah.
The other day, I was in a bar.
Quite red, actually.
You
were in a bar, were you?
Yeah, I was in a bar,
That's extraordinary.
And I was just having a
You told me you weren't having a drink since Sunday.
Oh, no, it was just a pint of shandy. Honestly,
right.
That's all
So
it was.
you don't call that a drink, do you?
Don't call it a drink,
Right.
no.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I thought, this bar's been invaded by fruit fly. You know fruit fly, those tiny little flies.
Fruit fly?
Yeah.
Was that the plural of fruit fly?
Yeah.
Fruit flies, you mean?
Fruit flies, yes.
Not fruit fly, singular.
No, fruit flies.
Yeah.
I thought there were 3 or 4 of them. And they kept flying past my eye.
Yeah.
And I kept going whoosh, 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 like that, The old karate.
Like you didn't fall asleep when you're going whoosh.
No. The old, that's true. But the old flicking of the hand.
Oh, yeah.
And then do you know what I discovered?
What did you discover?
Some bar lady person came over and said, you all right? I said, yeah, fine.
You think she had the DTs, did you?
No.
People used to get those. The delirium tremens, they used to call them.
No.
You think you're being followed around by a Spidey Norman, a 9-foot hedgehog?
No. Well, according to my father, there were guys during the war who used to take to drink so badly because they were terrified of combat and battle and all that. You used to see rats coming out of the walls.
Yeah, my dad said that we used to know a guy in Glasgow.
Yeah.
He would walk around like sort of beating the area behind him because he thought he was being followed by a massive dog.
Yeah, they used to see rats coming out the walls and all that kind of stuff. It must have been horrible.
Right.
But anyway, the point of the story...
So were you imagining it then? Were there no fruit flies?
No, the point of the story is this. I said, I'm sorry, fruit fly. No, it wasn't fruit fly. Anyway, I went home and did some research.
Yeah.
I've got what's called floaters.
Hey?
I've got floaters.
Oh, what, in the corner of your eyes?
Yeah, in the corner of your eyes.
You know what that means?
The little black spots.
I can tell you what that means.
What's that mean?
That means you've got some kind of detached retina scenario going
on. No,
It does. It happened to a friend of mine.
No.
And he started seeing all this stuff, and then suddenly he went to the hospital to get his eyes checked out, and he had a detached retina.
What?
He had a detached retina.
Are you mad?
And that means you have to get it fixed back in.
Oh, no. If you get a detached retina, mate, it's very difficult to get it fixed back in.
No, it's not. It can be done.
Oh, no, Mrs. Thatcher had it done.
Yeah, well, that was a long time ago.
Do you remember Lenny somebody who was a singer?
Lenny somebody?
Welcome home. Peters and Lee.
That was Peters and Lee. It wasn't Lenny anybody.
He was Lenny Peters.
Was he?
Yeah, and Diana Lee or somebody.
I knew him as Peters and Lee.
Do you know why he was blind? Because...
No, why?
When he was driving a car once, like this, he came to a junction where the road came to a V and he had to look backwards down the road.
Oh, yeah.
And he turned his head so fast and so around, it detached the retina in his eye.
And that was why we went blind?
Yeah.
Well, you better get yourself checked out then.
Well, I might head for an optician now if that's the case, because that's rather worrying, isn't it?
Yeah, mind you, just to finish up on the plurals scenario, I've got a tweet here from somebody who doesn't give a name, actually. D says the noun lettuce has various uses in the plural. Traditionally, the usage is 3 heads of lettuce, but the alternative 3 lettuces has become common during the last century.
Oh, right.
So lettuce, I think, is singular and plural.
OK, I'll take your word for it. Don't forget to come back tomorrow for another sparkling, as fizzy as a bottle of champagne, podcast from the 2 Mikes.
That wasn't Switzerland, was it? That's one of the great things to do.
No.
Drive under the Mont Blanc tunnel.
No, I wouldn't want to do that in case it fell in on me.